All right, good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, and we are gathered here with the Athens-Clarke County Commission and myself, Mayor Kelly Gertz, for a couple purposes tonight. We are going to have a special called session to take care of some things that we need to get across the finish line so that we can have staff move forward with some planning and programming. And then following the conclusion of that session, we are going to have one of our budget conversations as we move into FY25. So we're going to begin with a roll call from the clerk.
Davenport.
Here.
Link. Here. Taylor. Wright.
Present.
Fisher.
Here.
Poole.
Here.
Culpepper.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Thornton.
Here.
Hamby. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. We'll begin with our civility pledge, which has been provided to us by the Georgia Municipal Association. That indicates that the way we govern ourselves is often as important as the positions we take. Our collective decisions will be better when differing views have had the opportunity to be fully vetted and considered. All people have the right to be treated with respect, courtesy, and openness. We value all input, and we commit to conduct ourselves at all times with civility and courtesy to each other. So we have two items of old business, and as always, we will have public input on these items. Public input's a 2-minute opportunity, and given that we are in a change of venue, we don't have our standard clock and light with us, but I'll be keeping track of that, and I'll hold up my hand when you have 30 seconds remaining, and at 2 minutes, I will thank you for your time and ask us to have the next provider of input. So is there anyone who has input on any old or new business that we have in front of us tonight for a vote? Just let us know your name and the item to which you're speaking.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm speaking on item 1.
Just make sure we have your name for the record.
Yes. I'm Shanice Allen. I live at 130 Meredith Ridge Road. I serve as a board member of the YWCO. I proudly support the Girls Club program, which has served our community for over 40 years. On numerous occasions, we have stood before you advocating for funding to sustain this invaluable initiative. The significance of the program cannot be overstated. It positively impacts the lives of young women, their families, and the friendships made that will last for decades. For many, it serves as a beacon of hope and support. Today, I earnestly request your thoughtful consideration in fully funding this essential program. Our requested amount of $30,000 may seem modest, but its impact will be monumental, touching the lives of many within our community. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. We appreciate it. Is anyone else here to speak to old or new business? And again, just give us your name and let us know the item to which you're speaking.
Brad Hubacher, speaking for the YWCO, 562 Research Drive, Athens, Georgia. I just wanted to comment on Commissioner Fisher's question from our last meeting when he raised the question about whether or not nonprofits report back when they receive grants. And in really all of our grants, we report back. We're not required to report back. Many of our grants require us to report back to them. Even the ones that do not, we submit a summary report with our success stories. Again, our Girls Club is a 40-year program. We view the program and our partners as a really comprehensive way to teach our children, provide the children lifetime experiences, which enable them to dream, to grow up and be successful business people or engineers or accountants. Again, we're just advocating for help and funding for our program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hubacher. Is anyone else here to speak to any of the items of old or new business? All right, hearing none, we will move to discussion. First item on the agenda tonight was held over from the last voting meeting, and this is the FY25 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. It is often the case that the anticipated dollar value of the Community Development Block Grant Program from the federal government is somewhat different than the actual dollar amount that lands here in Athens-Clarke County or in any community that's what's termed an entitlement community across the country. And so we needed to make some modifications in the dollar values recommended for each of the programs included in the funding for the coming fiscal year. In addition, there were a couple of items that commissioners desired to add, utilizing some existing funding held over from prior fiscal years. So I'm going to ask Commissioner Link to articulate a motion including both the new dollar values as well as those items that she wishes to add and the dollar values associated with those programs.
Yeah, thank you. We had intended to assure that the youth development programs that did not make the cut got the funding at least at the level that the lowest ranked youth development program had gotten. They were only a point or two off from in the ranking system. So I want to move that we use ARPA funds to allocate funding to the YWCO Girls Club as well as the Project Rewire program to fund those at 60% of their request.
I'll second it.
And that's in addition to the new staff recommendations for the
Yes, in
coming
addition to
fiscal
the new
year's
staff
CDBG.
recommendation. So that would award the Chestnut Community Project Rewire Program $28,000 and YWCO $18,000.
All right, we've got a motion from Commissioner Link, and I've got a second from Commissioner Thornton. Commissioner Thornton is seconder. Do you have any additional remarks?
Yes, I wanted to speak to this because I really think that both programs should be awarded their total amount and using ARPA funds. I think that I've gotten figures now about the school districts system achievement, and I think, when I find it, I'll read it to you. But anyway, I think that all that we're trying to do with youth, we need to give them every dime we can. And we do have money in ARPA to fully fund both of these programs if we are serious about education. I was very disturbed when I read the status report from the state. And I'm going to send it to all the commissioners because anything that we do with public education, we need to know the data. I get, y'all know, you always hear me talk about data. So I second it because I really wanted to speak to it, but I'm prepared to make a substitute motion, if that's legal.
I'd be willing to amend the motion if it would include funding all of the youth development programs in the CBDG list, including the Education Matters program at that full amount. But from what I understand, there is some other funding that these programs have been awarded, and I believe Commissioner Fisher can speak to that.
So I wanted to kind of recognize folks in the order. So I saw Commissioner Houle and then Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I just wanted to clarify with the motioner that the funding source is specifically the Youth Development and Violence Prevention bucket of ARPA money
Yes.
as presented in
Yes.
the CDO. Okay, just to make sure that that's clear. Originally, that was all I was going to say, but I guess if we're debating whether to do more than the CDO, I feel uncomfortable about that for two big reasons. One is this is the first that would be presented before anyone. And there's a lot of programs to look at beyond the two that are in the CDO to make sure that we were doing that right. And then the second being, you know, there is a series of plans with a lot of strategic effort put in that are well underway that we've been discussing, you know, today even, and in recent days to use that what's ultimately not that much ARPA money remaining. So I'm cautious about us at the last minute dipping into it even more significantly without having a more thoughtful discussion around all the other ways that that money is being proposed to be used. Thanks.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think the funding, though, is really a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's not that much more about what we're trying to fund. And this is not the first time that we've done this. to my colleague, we've done other things where we have funded other organizations using ARPA dollars. So we've done this before. So I mean, it's not unusual for us to say that, you know, this may start a precedent. We have already set precedents for funding organizations, some that came unsolicited RFPs. So we've done this before. So I think it's a drop in the bucket for the money. And I really don't think it's that big of an issue. So I agree. If my colleague, Commissioner Thornton, is going to do a substitute motion, I most definitely would support that substitute motion to fund all the youth development program that's on here.
So just to be clear, I want to make sure that colleagues behind the rail here and the public understand exactly which programs are going to be funded at exactly which amount. So Commissioner Thornton, are you prepared to present that right now?
No, I had another comment, but no. I'm
I can amend my motion, my original motion.
Commissioner
To-
Link, if you'd like to take a
Yeah.
stab at that, let me
Commissioner
have you do
Lee-
that, and then I'll go ahead and turn back to Commissioner Thornton for a remark.
Yeah, I'll amend the original motion to include full funding of all the youth development programs, including the YWCO, the Chesson Community Program, and the Education Matters out of that ARPA Youth Development Fund.
And I'll second that.
okay.
All right, so I've got an amended motion on the floor. Commissioner Thornton, any further remarks?
The only thing that I would like to suggest, and this is not new with me being on the commission for as long as I have been, I wish the organizations that come to us for money, and I do appreciate, I think the chair of the board said that they always send reports. We found out that we just haven't gotten to us. So we're going to fix that. But I really wish everybody who gets funding from us, and it has to do with you, well, anything, it doesn't have to be done with. What are the factors that you're trying to address? Because I looked at this report from the school district, from the state. It doesn't look like we're doing, but I know we're doing great work, but it should be like Legos and connect to the bigger picture. We should be seeing decreases in behavior. We should be seeing decreases or increases in academics. So just in the future for any organization that I would support, look at the data that is being provided by the major institution and make sure you're plugging into that. And it makes it a lot easier when we've got to make a decision about funding. We've got to do better with accountability and responsibility. I'm not saying you're not doing the work. I'm just saying that there has to be a connection with the youth that you serve in the schools and the churches, so that can all be compiled together. So I know you're doing good work. I know you've been doing good work, but it would make it so much easier for commissioners to be making decisions about funding. We need to see that connect and that accountability.
Commissioner Fisher and then Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Commissioner Thornton's comments, one thing I am going to request when we get ready to vote for all of this, and I want the public to understand and be clear, all of us, and I hope my colleagues will agree, that we do need to get reporting back from the nonprofits that we serve. Yes, we do have a dashboard, but we have since I've been on this commission, we have had only one nonprofit that sends a report to us monthly. It talks about how many kids they're serving, it talks about the outcomes, and they talk about their progress. We have now, again, we got a dashboard. So what I'm gonna request that, Commissioner, we don't go to the dashboard, that we get a report, no more than 1 or 2 pages, from the nonprofits that we have been funded to tell us what's your outcome, how many people are you serving, what's your data. So then next year when we come back to this time, we say, hey, you know what, this is what this nonprofit is doing. They're doing good work. Because for me, moving forward, if I can't get that information and it can't get shared, I'm not going to support that nonprofit. I'm just going to be transparent about that. So for me, I hope my colleagues will agree that we get the information so we can have it, so we can truly work with the nonprofit that's doing the type of work that we're looking for our community and gonna make our community better.
Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Mayor. First question, then a couple thoughts. First, my question is, I just want to clarify, so when I'm looking at the agenda item, which aside from the tweaks from staff is basically the same as when the CDO is crafted. You know, to be clear, I support and have told everyone before, I support the CDO as presented. But I'm trying to make sense of what's being proposed on the fly here. I mean, I don't know if other people called each other, this is the first I've heard of this. So I hear people referencing youth development programs, but if I'm looking at the agenda item, I just see public services summary, and the descriptions for those public services, of course, you can find down below. But not all of the public services are funded fully, and I did not hear from Commissioner Link in her amended motion all of them listed. So I guess my two-part question is, if you could re-clarify which organizations from the public services summary specifically would be funded, and then secondly, why those and not the others?
And Commissioner, it just may be helpful to look at the kind of chart on page 5 and 6 and kind of run
Okay.
down.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have access to the internet, so I'm looking at some of this on my phone. But I can tell you the conversation that I had with staff when this whole topic initially came up before we were aware of the cuts and the CDO that I proposed last time. The logic was that we need to fund these programs from appropriate sources. And we had well over $3 million in ARPA youth development funding, which would be appropriate to go to other youth development programs. We did not have an appropriate source of excess funding for housing programs, which the one program that did not get funded was the housing counseling program from Athens Land Trust. That program also ranked quite a few points lower than the Education Matters program that got funded at 60%. So you know, I would like, you know, the idea was to pay some respect to the process that the committee went through in determining the, allocating the original, what was thought to be the original pot of funds. I would like us to have a broader conversation about getting some housing counseling funding out there in this upcoming budget, because it is a real need. Those of us who attended the Fair Housing Conference a couple weeks ago learned that from lenders and housing providers. So that was the logic. You know, we were specifically focusing on the youth development programs because we had a pot of youth development money available. And the 60% figure was come up with because the program that ranked just above those by 1 or 2 points was funded at 60%.
So all of that I understood, the 60% and everything, but now we're saying 100%, right? That's what the new motion is?
That's
is
the new
100%?
motion.
So
Okay.
let me
So
just,
which organizations again? Because there's like the Georgia Conflict Center as well. There's the Family Promise of Athens that are not fully funded in the staff agenda item.
so maybe it'd be helpful, Commissioner, if I just run down these line items.
I can't.
And I'll contrast the dollar value that I believe is being suggested here at full funding level versus the lower level dollar value. So just to look at the youth development items, this would have the Georgia Conflict Center program funded at approximately $34,000 rather than $30,000. This would have the Education Matters program funded at $50,000 rather than $30,000. This would have the Chesson Community Project Rewire program funded at $46,894 rather than $0, and would have the YWCO funded at $30 rather than $0, with the gap made up from American Rescue Plan Act dollars that are from the Youth Development and Violence Prevention bucket. So is that everybody's understanding of the proposal on the table?
And not,
That's fine.
Family Promise? No. Okay. Well, I guess now that I've got that more clarified, may I use my turn here to say my remarks, Mayor Gertz, or would you like me
Please.
to wait for others?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm always cautious of us just on the last minute, especially with financial decisions, kind of just, doing something on the fly. So I'm gonna have to sit with this one for a second before I know how I'm gonna vote. I was very prepared to vote in support of the, agenda item with the CDO as initially anticipated. But I think that's something we really need to be cautious about. I appreciate Commissioner Link bringing up appropriate funding sources. Unlike the Community Partnerships Program that we voted on before, where we have an opportunity in the upcoming budget discussions to put more funding toward the Community Partnerships Program, which might be a good place for us to put even more funding toward for organizations like this to apply to and have a good chance of getting it. Unlike that, this is CDBG, which comes from the feds, and why we had to delay it at all is because they're giving us less than we thought they would and less than they gave us last year, which should indicate that we should expect the same or less next year, which means that whatever we're funding with ARPA this year will not be funded by CDBG next year. And unlike this year, there won't be any ARPA left. This is the last year we can allocate any ARPA money to anything. So I am very cautious about us using this non-renewable resource, if you will, to fund programs that are going to be expecting sustained funding through a source that is insufficient to fund at the level that we're talking about today. So, again, Community Partnerships Program seems like a good place for us to have the discussion around how to support these nonprofits that I, like a lot of colleagues here are articulating, agree we should be supporting more. But this kind of on-the-fly dipping into ARPA to kind of pick which orgs we want to fund at the last minute fully makes me uncomfortable on its face. And then secondly, the source being something we can't replicate in the future, I think sets a pretty unfortunate precedent. I won't have to deal with that. I don't have to deal with the repercussions of that, but everybody else up here likely will. So anyway, thanks.
Commissioner Davenport, I've not heard from, so I'm going to turn to him.
Yes, thank you. So, unfortunately, I must have missed the email because I am confused as well. So, with the budget recommendation, with the motion on the floor, we're fully funding. So, at our last meeting, we were told that the CDBG funding will not be fully funded because of the amount of funds that were allocated to us. But minus what was allocated to us, we're going to use ARPA funds for the total of $352,494, or to fully fund them.
So ARPA funds would simply make up the gap between what will be funded by CDBG and total requests. So for example, the High School Completion Initiative Education Matters Program would be funded at $50,000. $30,000 of those dollars would come from CDBG and $20,000 would come from ARPA.
Okay.
Just as one
and that's for all the entities on the public service summary.
All the youth serving ones.
Youth serving one. So there's no real dollar amount. How much, does anyone know the dollar amount that's coming from ARPA?
I can tell you very quickly. So 30,000 plus 16.9, so that's 46.
So Georgia Conflict Center, and I'm sorry to belabor this, they were recommending $34,200, and if we're fully funding, and that's what they requested. What they recommended was $30,000, so we're going to give them $4,200.
That's right.
So
Under what's
ACC
on
High
the
School Completion Initiative, they requested $50,000, but they were only recommended $30,000, so we're going to fill the gap for $20,000.
That's
okay,
right.
There we go.
So in sum, approximately $70,000 would be coming from American Rescue Plan Act, Youth Development and Violence Prevention dollars.
I have 101,000 for those three as my total. But again, this is where this on-the-fly thing is difficult to make sense of, but. 20,000 for Education Matters, 46,984 for Chess and Community, 30,000 for YWCO, and 4,200 for GCC. That totals
You're right, I'm sorry, I was comparing the wrong
101,184.
two items for Chess and Community. I was looking at FY24's allocation. I think you're right, it's approximately 101.
Thank you.
And can we just clarify from staff the amount of money left in that ARPA Youth Development Fund? It's well over $3 million, from what I understand.
I see Manager Williams nodding yes.
Yes. Is the question the balance of it?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I believe it's in excess of 3 million.
Yeah, I mean, we have that much money, and we only have till the end of the year to allocate it. We want to assure that it does get allocated in this community, and we're going to have some very tough conversations next year about how these programs persist. And I want to encourage the folks who run them to, start seeking other funding sources. We've been pretty flush with this COVID-related federal funding, and I think we're going to have to encourage conversations in the greater community to seek private funding more and more, and I would hope we can invite private partners to the table for that.
We've got Commissioner Myers, then Commissioner Thornton.
Yeah, if that 100, that was a new number that you got, Commissioner Hool, 100,000, how much was that?
Just over 100.
101, 184.
Okay, I'm just saying that that's upping the ARPA usage by $54,000 from what the CDO was to begin with. And I do feel a little uneasy about this because we have received other unsolicited proposals from Destin, for example. There are other community nonprofits working with youth, and we're just awarding, $46,000 here on the cuff that we haven't had time to reflect on. And we have had people concerned a little bit about the process here. So I am a little reluctant here just to give that money away at this point without other nonprofits having an opportunity to come before us.
Commissioner Thornton.
I thought I knew what I wanted to say, but let me try this. First of all, to Commissioner Hool, we've done flyby stuff over the years past, okay? And I usually was the one got flew over in the past. Just want to put that out there. We are punishing nonprofits, our community supporters, because we're not together. And I'm not, and when I say we're not together, I'm talking about the whole unified government. Our reporting back to us has been none. I think sometimes accepting non-solicited proposals, unless it's an emergency, is something we're going to have to reckon with. And then we have to make sure that nonprofits are working with other nonprofits to expand, their reach and their resources. I've talked to Manager Williams about this, I know, over 4 years. And now we're here. These nonprofits do what we cannot do, but we did not have a good playbook for them to follow. And we should take responsibility for that. I'm going to stick to the substitute motion, and maybe when we have our retreat, we can prepare, because we spend a bunch of money when we really, and I'm not even going to make a list of the stuff that we spent money on in the past. We've spent a bunch of money that did not benefit a lot of people or some people. But I'm trying to move forward, and I'm going to stick with the substitute motion, and then we try to fix it before next year comes.
I want to recognize Manager Williams and then turn to Commissioner Taylor and Hool, and then we're going to move to a vote.
Yes, I'd like to address the question about not being responsive. We've got a process that the commission laid out in February of 2022 that so many funds would be set aside for youth development pending the convening of a committee in joint concert with the Clarke County School District, which Commissioner Fisher sat on, and they just concluded their work, and in fact, they presented in this very chamber today. So there has been a process that was approved by Mayor and Commission, and we followed that process. It took a little longer than we thought, but here we are. So how the Commission decides to allocate the youth development funds rests with y'all. Now, if you would like to direct me to have staff do anything additional, I'm glad to do it, but that's the process we followed, and that's the direction you gave us.
Commissioner Taylor.
I respect and appreciate the process that has been put before us as far as allocating funds. But I do feel like because we are in the midst of having to dedicate and allocate these funds toward youth development, and this is youth development money, that I don't think that there should be a back and forth. Taking into note next year's funding, I do agree with what Commissioner Fisher said as far as receiving that data of successes and outcomes, because I truly believe that once the work is put forth, then the less and less through grant funding and initiatives, you'll be able to receive funding from other sources. With that said, I do support the motion that's on the floor. As a mom, I do believe that our children need to be doing something productive this summer. So, yeah.
Commissioner Houle, and then I'll turn to Commissioner Link, and then we'll vote.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify, the motion on the floor is an amended original motion, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so a few thoughts, which we'll conclude with a substitute motion if I can get a second. I don't know how many times this exact body comprised of these people has gotten together and talked about how we need to give each other a heads up in advance of meetings. And now this has been just thrown out here with at least a few of us, myself included, having not heard about it at all until we're sitting in front of people on camera trying to figure out what the actual amount of money we're even talking about is and what actual organizations we're awarding it to are. It sounds easy to say, just fully fund the youth development orgs. But we don't have a clean way of defining youth development orgs. The agenda item doesn't do that. The agenda item uses completely different terminology. I mean, who's to say that Family Promise, who's housing families with children, is not serving youth? Who's to say that the Athens Land Trust, who's giving people affordable housing counseling for families to move into housing, is not serving youth? And why these CDBG applicants and not the Community Partnerships Program applicants or the multiple people who've emailed us, including one organization gave us a very, very nice, thick packet that they hand-delivered to each of our mailboxes with a proposal for how to use ARPA funds. Why are we just picking these ones today and not any of those? Nothing against these programs. These are great programs, but abandoning process at the last minute seems to me to be the latest example of responding to who's in the room rather than staying consistent to a process that we've laid out and that we've asked staff to stand behind. And I think it's this repeated last-minute changing that ultimately erodes the trust in this institution and in these processes that we lay out. It might seem like a small amount compared to the $3 million in ARPA to just pull $100,000 out right now, but that's $50,000 more, and I bet when we're talking budget later, we're all going to be arguing over things down to the dollar, never mind the $50,000 mark. So there's a lot about this discussion that is, in my mind, missing the mark in terms of how we should responsibly govern and how we should responsibly distribute funding and how we can responsibly set up the organizations we want to partner with to be supported in the same way next year, because this funding won't be here. And this magical thinking about different private funders stepping up next year, I just don't think actually meaningfully addresses this ongoing issue. I also want to clarify that, at least from my perspective, we have been having organizations report back to us, and staff has been aggregating that info and has been giving it to us. And that doesn't mean that we're getting everything that's reported to staff, but let's be honest, we wouldn't read every page if it was given to us anyway. That's why they aggregate it for us. There's a dashboard that's publicly viewable. These funds are not being awarded and then not getting reported on after. That's just not true. So anyway, I'm going to make a substitute motion to approve what I thought we all arrived here expecting to approve, which is the agenda item from staff as presented, with the additional funding from the CDO, from Commissioners Link, Fisher, Myers, that allocates an additional $28,000 to Chesson Community, an additional $18,000 to YWCO, for a total of $46,000 from the ARPA Youth Development and Violence Prevention funding, which sets that in accordance with everything we talked about before today.
There's a substitute motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, there's a substitute motion, second from Commissioner Myers. Commissioner Myers, given that you've seconded, turn to you for input. Commissioner Link I'd recognized earlier, and then we're going to move to a vote.
Yeah, I just came prepared to vote on the CDO that was there, and I realize there's a lot of different organizations, and I just want to stick with what I was prepared and knowledgeable about. I do want to point out that I am looking right now at the ARPA Youth Development Summer 2022 outcomes, 23 outcomes, and the Boys and Girls Club outcomes on the ARPA homepage under Youth Development and Violence Prevention.
Commissioner Link?
I just want to reemphasize my reasoning in the original CDO, which is sticking to the youth development programs. And I did have multiple back and forth with staff pointing out that these were the programs that would qualify for that ARPA youth development. And that's why these particular programs were chosen for additional funding, but it was also because they ranked very high. They were just a point or two below the program above them that did get funded. And my logic, I mean, I'm happy to fund them fully, and I had mentioned that to staff in crafting the original CDO, and, you know, as pointed out, that the CBDG process, they ranked lower than the Education Matters program that got 60% funding. That's why we came up with the original 60% funding. I have no problem with funding all three of those programs fully, considering that we have a limited time to spend these funds, and that they have all been vetted. They've gone through this CBDG process, which has pretty stringent federal requirements, just like the ARPA money does too. So I do have problems with some of these unsolicited proposals that come to us, but I don't have problems with funding these organizations fully because A and B, we've worked with both of them before. They have a long track record of success. And they're also summer programs, so there is some urgency. I feel like, you know, with the urgency of getting this money out there quickly so these summer programs can get our kids active in safe environments for the summer is quite urgent. And we did this a couple years ago, getting urgent summer funding, youth development funding out there. So there's a whole lot of reasons to assure that these programs are fully funded and you know, full of kids who are taken care of for the summer. You know, I feel like there's a whole lot of logic to go ahead and move forward with fully funding.
Madam Clerk, could you go ahead and do a roll call beginning with the substitute motion from Commissioner Houle?
Yes.
Culpepper,
No.
Thornton,
You mean,
No, sorry,
Myers?
I'm out my order here.
you mean Meyer?
Myers,
Yes.
Davenport,
Yes.
Link,
No.
Taylor,
No.
Wright,
No.
Fisher,
No.
3 yes, 6 no.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll return to the original motion, beginning with Commissioner Link.
Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify, because the motioner, when she was speaking, only listed 3 organizations, but previously I thought it was 4. So how many organizations are we voting on, and what's the total funding amount?
My belief is that it's Georgia Conflict Center at $34,200, the ACC High School Completion Initiative through the Education Matters Program at $50,000, Chesson Community through Project Rewire at $46,894, and the YWCO at $30,000.
I believe that's correct.
All right, roll call, Madam Clerk.
Davenport,
Yes.
Link,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Wright,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Poole,
No.
Culpepper,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Thornton.
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk, I appreciate it. All right, we're moving on to the calendar year 2024 Pavement Maintenance Program. Pavement is...
Can I ask a question to my colleagues? Because I think Commissioner Houle and Commissioner Myers alluded to something about a package that we should have received.
Just, if we'd follow up after the meeting, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next agenda.
I just want to make sure that we discuss that because it goes back to unsoliciting report. We need a process. So they brought it up, and I just need clarification because we need to fund every program that helps our youth. I just want to go on the record.
Okay, and the clerk may be able to kind of identify the things that have rolled into the mailbox as well. So. All right, so pavement is best maintained when the weather is warm, so we need to move quickly on this. And so staff has provided us with a pavement maintenance program, and so I would entertain a motion regarding this item.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Wright. I've got a second from Commissioner Taylor. Commissioner Wright, any input on this?
I'm ready to vote.
Any further feedback, Commissioner Taylor?
No, this is really needed in our community, and so I'm so glad that we will now drive on smoother roads.
Any other input? Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I would like to just ask Manager Williams to go over that finer point that you reviewed with me just before this.
Yes, thank you. So Commissioner Myers was inquiring about a cul-de-sac that was proximate to a segment that is due to be paved. And as you know, we have adopted, the ACC Gov has adopted a data-driven approach to determining the condition of the roads, which include a radar assessment of them, which produces a score. And all the in this, what's being proposed are, I believe, roads that are below a score of 37. A few years ago, it was suggested that because we were fairly dogmatic about, to be fair across the county, what the score was. There are costs involved with remobilizing the contractor. And so if there are segments that are proximate, adjacent to, or connected to, that are very close in the score, then they may also should be considered. So Commissioner Myers brought up one particular segment, and we looked at it with staff. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and pass this because we are in the warm season and we can get paving moving. And I'm going to work with staff to come up with a review of the segments and any that may be directly adjacent to it that are within a few percentage points of 37 that makes sense just to knock them out while we're there. Now, that will require more funds, but I'll say this, we won't be asking for general fund money or anything like that. I mean, the paving program is a mix of general fund, what's known as LMIG, Long-Term Maintenance Improvement Grant from GDOT and T-SPLOST. But because it's calendar year, we work on a fiscal year, there are some funds that are out there, for next year that we could go ahead and apply to those. We'd like a little more time for that analysis. The answer that I initially gave Commissioner Myers was, well, the approach that is before you now is called a worst first approach. So it's dogmatic, it's 37 below, and those, regardless of where they are, those are the ones that we're recommending for funding. So if there are some that make sense to go ahead and knock out because they're so close while the contractor's out there, we're going to do that analysis, and of course the body, I don't think we'll have it ready for June the 5th, but we may have it ready for you as soon as you come back from your break.
Follow up, Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, and I do want to follow up that I wasn't really asking for any special treatment here. There had been indication from TPW with the residents here that it would be on this year's pavement plan, and therefore my inquiry into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Culpepper?
Yeah, can we make sure when we're looking at the list of roads that we're taking in consideration what's going on with this Brooklyn Creek Interceptor? and we're not repaving roads that are about to get torn back up with the construction?
Yes, sir, Commissioner Culpepper, that's a great point. And I will say TPW and PUD have really coordinated well in the last few years of taking time to review upcoming projects to make sure that that type of approach that doesn't instill confidence in anybody doesn't occur. So thank you for that point.
Any further input? Commissioner Davenport.
Yes, thank you, Manager. I just got a question about something that I've asked you about is Honey Tree. I noticed that's not on the list, and it's really not the road. It's the public utilities pipe that's under the road. I thought I saw it the first iteration, but I do see that nearby, and I just lost it. That Cedar Creek Drive and Sandstone Drive at Horseshoe Circle is going to get paved, and that's right next door to Honey Tree. So do I send you a request, or if that can get done? But I know that's a complex issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Davenport. We've not forgot that. So, y'all, what that has to do with was there's a Honey Tree. There was some sewer work done, I believe, by a contractor, and there's some sagging that's going on in the midst of the where the line used to be, and we can probably figure out why that is. So there's a debate going on between TPW and PUD staff about who should be responsible for repaving that section. So we're close to doing that. And what I would say is they haven't quite figured out the total responsibility for it. But what I'd like to do is also include that in the look back on these proximate segments.
Could staff give me or us a report on how much it would cost? Because it's sagging really bad again, and we just keep TPW, public utilities keep patching it, and it just keeps sagging, then we patch it. And it's got to be costing the ratepayers tons of money every month, every other month to get that patch. But if we can just tear up that road, fix it, it can give me I will try to convince my awesome colleagues that I love dearly that we can put it in our 2025 budget to get that done. If you send me a number, I'd love to include that.
Thank you, Commissioner Davenport.
All right, knowing that we'll probably get an amendment in the July-August timeframe, everybody comfortable with this now? All right, we've got a motion from Commissioner Wright and a second from Commissioner Taylor on the floor. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, given that we have one item of new business, I need a motion for suspension of rules.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Davenport and a second from Commissioner Myers for suspension of rules. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and so this single item would just be for a change in time and date for the June voting meeting. And so the ordinance would amend this, and section 1 of this reads that the mayor and commission of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia shall hold as regular business Wednesday, June 5th, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the Clarke County School District's Vernon Payne Meeting Hall in the administrative offices at 595 Prince Avenue, with additional security measures as implemented by the mayor and commission in the meeting place for the City Hall Chamber, 301 College Avenue. Section 2 says all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict are hereby repealed. And Section 3 notes that the clerk of commission, in consultation with the county attorney, shall have the power to correct scrivener's errors. So entertain a motion to support this move in time and date.
So move.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Link, second from Commissioner Myers. Commissioner Myers?
Yes, perhaps I missed an email, but could you review why we're changing the date?
Yes, we are changing the date because the Clarke County School District has a hearing in this space on the date when we would normally meet. And so we're coordinating with them. And just while we're talking about the schedule, just a quick heads up about the next budget meetings. I'll reiterate this at the end of the evening, but we'll be meeting at 5:30 p.m. Thursday, May 16th, so 2 days from now, at our Doherty Street Auditorium. We'll be meeting Wednesday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. in the CCSD building. If needed, we'll be meeting Thursday, May 23rd at Doherty Street, and then again, we'll be having the vote 6 PM, June 5th, Wednesday, June 5th, here on Prince Avenue. So those are the meetings forthcoming.
And May 22nd is because of the election.
And May 22nd moves because every time we've got an election date, we move to the Wednesday following. Correct. Commissioner Houle?
And to clarify, the taxpayer Bill of Rights hearings are at that May 22nd agenda setting meeting, and then the third one will be at this voting meeting on June 5th.
Good
Correct?
point, thank you, yeah. Taxpayer Bill of Rights, 22nd and June 5th. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, and that's sort of was my question. So we got the three. I guess the first one was last Thursday. Since we've been sort of challenged on this, I want to make sure that we did have the
Yep.
three.
So we had our first
taxpayer-
Taxpayer Bill of Rights last week. Next one will be
Thursday.
on the 22nd, and then the final one will be June 5th.
Thank you.
Yep. As required by Georgia law. Yeah, Attorney Drake.
An ordinance amending the date, time, and place of regular meetings of the Commission of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, and for other purposes.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the special called session of the Athens-Clarke County.
So moved. Okay, Dexter, I'll do second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Fisher to adjourn, second from Commissioner Wright. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Adjourning. All right, we are going to go ahead and move into our budget conversation. And as we do every year, we have constitutional and elected officials who are going to meet with us for 20 minutes a slot. I'm going to stick with that. So presenters, I'd recommend about a 10-minute presentation, so you got about 10 minutes for Q&A. And I believe first up is going to be Sheriff John Q. Williams.
Mayor, I would like for you to conduct the budget meetings.
I'd be glad to.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, ready? Ready?
Ready.
All right, thank y'all. I've been way too familiar with microphones lately. I'm gonna take my first 5 to 10 minutes to kind of just, one, thank you all for working with me over these last several years, but I also want to go down a little road to kind of tell you how we got to where we are today. The top 2 areas I would like y'all to look at in the Clarke County Sheriff's Office budget is, again, the salary of our deputies in particular, and increasing our fleet size. Both things are very needed. So let me go back to when I first took office in 2021. I had no say in this. A pay study was done, and 3 months into my begin as sheriff, there was suddenly a $10,000 difference between my deputies and the police department and all other law enforcement officers in the county. To me, that sets the bar for anybody who's a sworn certified officer, which should include my deputies, not just police officers, not just detectives, not just investigators for the DA and solicitor's office, definitely should also include deputies. That fell on deaf ears at that time. Come 2022, after I had met with the mayor and the manager on several occasions, I was told that we need to go through the capital budget and budget process in order to get this fixed, in addition to trying to seek additional pay studies. That was not met. We got a slight increase. So in 2023, I made sure to include in the budget line items a requested increase. That did not go through as well. And I want to just reiterate this. You should all have in your packets, did we hand them out? My folks will be coming just to hand the packet. It's kind of similar to what we submitted, but in order to get equitable pay between sheriff's deputies who are sworn and certified and can do everything that law enforcement anywhere else in the county can do. In fact, we can do it throughout the state. It would be considerably less to get us equal than it would be to pay overtime or any other considerable expenses that would result. So I bring this to you with this just to not paint the most horrible picture, but I want to make sure that you all are clear that I'm asking for this. I'm telling you that this is affecting the Clarke County Sheriff's Office, the jail, and the courthouse in very negative ways, and long-term, it is not sustainable to stay where we at as far as pay goes. If you look towards other areas, and I'm gonna try to be nice with this because I've been told that I was threatening in the past, that people kind of took offense at how I said things, and I was posturing. This is not posturing. I have worked for 3.5 years to try to make sure that I protect this county. I don't talk bad about this county. I don't talk bad about other people in this government. And that seems to fall on deaf ears. Not tonight. I want you to hear this clearly. I'm telling you, if we don't get help from you all to pay our deputies better, we're going to have situations just like in Fulton County. It's coming. It's not a threat. If you want people dying in jail, keep having us be short-staffed. Keep having us short-staffed at the courthouse. These are constitutionally obligated things that we have to do, and I need you all's help. Because, yes, you do control the budget. And yes, one of your former peers on this did go live stream and point out that while she can't control the sheriff, they can control the purse strings and get me to do what they want. That is not acceptable. I hope none of you take that same approach. We don't want dead bodies. One is not acceptable. We can't have the bar be, well, we're not bad as Fulton County. We don't want any. We've had people sick. This is the sickest society that we've had, and we need to fix that. We also need to fix our vehicle situation. I come from the police department. Nothing I say is to go against the police or any other law enforcement. I support them all. But I need the sheriff's office to be in that same pot. When y'all say y'all gonna improve public safety, by golly, I think that means us too. I need help. We need more vehicles. Imagine if any of you who drive, I know, Commissioner Myers, you do a lot of biking. So imagine this with your bike. You got a car. It breaks down. It's in the shop. We order a new one, but it's going to take us 3 years to get it. Would that be acceptable for you? That's the situation that we have dealing with fleet. We're approved for these vehicles, but we can't get them for 3 years. So we need to improve and increase our fleet numbers. I'm only asking, I asked for 10. We were able to keep 3 older cars, but now we're asking for 7 more. We need more than that. Just by comparison, the police department has enough cars for everybody that's hired there to have their own car assigned to them. I'm not even asking for those numbers. I'm just asking for enough to get by that when one car goes down, we have other cars that people can drive. We don't have that luxury right now, and we're nowhere near having enough cars for each one of my deputies, even without the positions filled, to be able to have access to a car with lower mileage that is safe. We're looking at the jail meal program, so I'm just going to tell real quickly about some things that are coming up. The amount of money that we're paying to the prison work camp to receive what is often lower quality food than what we would need, that is not the appropriate caloric intake for the folks that are in the jail, that my staff will not actually eat. We have vendors who can basically come in and help build our kitchen. Many of you have been, you've seen our kitchen. It's not fully equipped, but we could get it fully equipped. We could get it staffed by a company and save about $150,000 to $200,000 at least, as opposed to working at the work camp. And I've got a good relationship with the warrant. I love him dearly, but just last week we had food that came in that was raw. Just this morning, we had bread that was brought that was moldy. We cannot continue like that. That's why we have inmates attacking our deputies and detention officers. That's why we have more injuries. That's why we have conditions, as people say, at the jail that people want to complain about. Quickly, the MMT contract, that's our mental health services. Originally, when I took office, it was a $300,000 a year expense that was approved by the commission, and annually we were funded $270,000. So we always had to find that extra $30,000 somewhere else. This is no longer sustainable either. that's another reason we need more vehicles, because we're going to have to do these transports ourselves. Paying another company is just, I guess, unacceptable. It's unsustainable. We can't continue to do it, and we got a little bit behind because of some financial, I guess, miscues between us and finance, and that company pretty much said, hey, we're not going to transport until we get caught up. So we had to come before y'all to get an addendum to that contract to allow us to pay money that we had, but we had to get permission to pay that bill. We need more vehicles so that we can do that. We need more staffing so that we can do that. These are my main asks, and I will now turn over to questions, and I got my esteemed colleagues with me so they can help and back me up. Let's go.
Oh.
Thank you, Sheriff. And just for the record, I want to use the kind of most recent numbers that are currently posted on our hiring portal. So currently, a deputy sheriff begins at $48,630 a year, and an ACC PD police officer begins at $53,733 a year. So got a couple questions. Begin with Commissioner Thornton.
We always appreciate you coming to speak for us, before us. And I wasn't that person, whoever that did that. Are you fully staffed now?
No, we're still over 40 spots now. And the other thing is, with the police department, from what I hear, they're full. There's going to be more arrests. We're going to have more people in jail. And we don't have the staffing to open up other pods. We're going to have people sleeping on floors. That's the only way that we can maintain. We can't adequately give people their time out. Also, with House Bill 1105 coming through, being forced to do extra as far as immigration goes, we're going to have higher numbers in the jail. And that's going to drive up costs for food and everything else as well. Because again, the more officers are out there, the more they're going to arrest people. And the lower staff we are, the more time the PD is going to spend in that intake. So they're not going to be in and out the jail. So it's really going to affect everybody.
So actually, you're, as far as the starting salary, you're asking us to consider the, what did you say that was, Mayor? The starting salary for?
Starting salary for a ACC PD officer is $53,733 this fiscal year. Now, of course, if you take my budget recommendations, that's going to go up by 4% beginning July 1.
So that plus the 4%?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you, Sheriff, for coming. My question is, you talk about the fleet. When was the last time that you ordered vehicles, and are you expecting some vehicles in the future?
So, right, currently we have one that was just ordered. It's waiting at the outfitter. It's been there for, what, 4 weeks? Yes, sir. 5.5. So it's been waiting 5.5 weeks. We don't have an actual, I guess, timeline for when it's actually going to be there. The last two that we got, it took just about 2.5 years for us to get those replaced. One was one that was wrecked. Another one was just taken out of service just due to life cycle.
Okay. One thing that you did not mention, and I want to know, would this be helpful to you? I noticed the signing bonus for ACCPD and the Sheriff's Department is different. Mm-hmm. Would that help you if this commission, say we give the same signing bonus to Deputy Sheriff, what you do, and whatever we give for detention officers? Would that be a help, at least get you started for trying to retain people, well, not retain people, trying to get people in the door, and then maybe work on the budget adjustment as we move forward? But would that be a help to you?
Anything we can get to get people in the door is going to be helpful and beneficial, but my focus would always shift towards keeping them. We got 2 people that handed in their resignation this week. One of them has been confirmed he's being hired by the PD. So we're going to keep having those. And a lot of these folks, we get them in the door, we train them. Some of we even get through the academy. But then once they say, hey, we got this experience too. We can go get a bump for having experience and go over to the PD and make $8,000, $9,000 more right out the gate. And it's a no-brainer. I would do it too, honestly. You know, the chief of police makes more money than me, but I just like my job and I like what I'm doing. I don't fight for me. I just fight for my people. But yes, that would be a help. Not a long-term But in the short term, it could, I guess, close the dam a little bit.
One more question, you just brought up another thought in my mind. So if they leave, if your deputy leave and go to HCCPD, do they get that bonus or not?
No, they do not get the hiring bonus.
Okay.
But, and I will just take this time to thank Chief Salters. He has worked with me. They have some grant funding. They've offered to help share some of that money with us. So if we do realize that, that would be a big help as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hool.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just get clarity on the difference in figures between the bonus that's currently offered to ACCPD and what's currently offered to Sheriff? Do we have that on hand?
We do, 10,000 versus 6,000.
Okay, so $4,000 difference. Sorry, when I was writing everything down, sorry if I missed that being said. Okay. And then do we have a figure for, so if I'm doing my math right, 4% on 53,733 would bring up our entry-level ACCPD officers to 55,882 and change. So the gap between that 48,630 for the sheriff's office, or they'd be getting 4% too in the budget,
Correct.
right? So, but anyway, if we're trying to do something here, we'd just be probably overriding whatever that 4% is with a raw number. So do we have a sense of what that number would be for all the positions? Because like I would need to multiply that by whatever number of people we're talking about getting in the door.
We have that. My good captain here has that answer.
Captain Freeze, I'm the Administrative Services Section Commander. When we submitted our original budget proposal to you and made calculations on the staffing at that time, the difference to bring us up to parity with existing filled positions on the banded pay scale that we're using in public safety would be just over $653,000. Now, we've added additional deputies since that time, DOs since that time. I'd have to rerun those numbers, but from a scale perspective, it's give or take between $650,000 and probably around $780,000 to bring the department, our agency, up to parity with the police department.
Okay, thank you. And then I just wanted to, so I'm looking at C117 in our budgets. I don't know if any of you have that on hand for you, but when I look at the list of things recommended here, and I'm thinking about your food request, Sheriff Williams, I see a food service coordinator, and then I see jail meals and meal preparation. So were you specifically referring to that jail meals and meal preparation figure as the one that's the gap between completely unacceptable food and decent food?
So it's actually, since then, we've started doing more research. So that does not actually include the position that we're asking for the manager. This would actually be us contracting out essentially with another company to provide the kitchen equipment and staffing, and that would be for all the meals based on that up to 450 per day. And then also it would include the ability to make meals for our staff as well at a lower cost.
Okay, and when you say that, are you referring to that 131,690 for jail meals and meal preparation? Am I looking at the right line item here?
One more time, Commissioner.
So there's a line item that says jail meals and meal preparation, 131,690, and then just above it, food service coordinator, a full-time position at 73,509.
Yeah,
So the 131,690 is the real cornerstone thing here?
what we
Or is it?
There were two approaches to our solution. One was to bring meal preparation in-house entirely, using existing staff with the augmentation of a manager and a contract nutritionist. They would in turn use our, what do we call our trustees? Our trustees to facilitate meal preparation in-house. What we found through basic research over the last 3.5 months, comparatively, private sector provision of these services is commonplace. It's typically more cost-effective, both as a point of a reduction in initial capital outlay and operating cost, to go with a private entity under contract. For us, that particular position would manage the food service operation if we provided it in whole. If we were to outsource that operation, then what would essentially happen in that situation, They would provide the personnel to prepare the food and to manage the process, to ensure that we're compliant with accreditation standards through a variety of entities. They provide those 3 meals a day. Within the cost per meal, all of the capital expense and non-capital equipment expense, utensils, the things that we would need to build out the kitchen facility in whole would be covered by that lease over a 5-year period. So it
Okay,
becomes an
so-
operating expense.
So hearing those two options, then I guess, which of these line items is the dollar figure for that latter one? Is that the 131,690?
That would be if we took it in-house.
That-
If
okay.
we outsource it, our calculations now, based upon the 3 vendors that seem to be very prevalent in the state of Georgia, across a number of agencies like our own, as well as the correctional agencies that we have in the state, would indicate a savings compared to what we're actually paying the Clarke County Correctional Institute for food service of about $150,000 to $170,000. So we get an outsourced vendor to provide that food service for us. And that covers the entire cost of operation, capital, non-capital expense, and amortizes over the life of the services agreement. I believe it's about 5 years. We have one vendor wanting to do 7 years. I think 5 years is a reasonable period.
And if you'd like to submit a revised request, that we'd absolutely accept that if you want to kind of send that to us after this meeting, because we've got just a minute left. And
Okay,
I
yeah,
want to recognize Commissioner Myers.
Go on. Yeah, in terms of the increasing the salary and such, I don't know if you mentioned, I know we've had some communication before about the effect of the understaffing on injuries among officers. Can you talk to that? And then I also wanted to ask about the overtime, part-time pay effect.
So just without specific numbers, we can get those and send them to you. But in generally, the lower staff we have at the jail, it's just like if you have kids at home. If you got, a mom, the dad is not in, and you got 4 kids to take care of, every time you turn around, one other kid is not getting the attention that they need, and they're subject to act out in any way. It's no different than running a jail. So we should have 2 people at least working each unit. At most, we usually have 1. So when you have 1 deputy or detention officer and you have 60 to 75 jail residents that are in that same unit with them, they get bold. And then when you compound, if they're not getting the food that they want, if they're not getting the exercise and outside time that they want, it just becomes a horrible situation. And just in the last year, we've had 3 major incidents where our deputies were assaulted, injured, and I had to go visit them in the hospital. We've got 1 who I think is permanently out of work as a result of an attack within the jail.
If you could share any of that data with us, that would be helpful. Also, you mentioned that if you had more full-time staff, I'm looking at these numbers, you wouldn't need as much overtime and part-time. And so I'm assuming that would happen. If you had the salaries were bumped up and you were able to get more staffing, you'd need less overtime and part-time, but then you probably, I would assume, like with the police department, the budget's gone up because they have more filled positions. So the overall budget probably would not go down because you'd have more officers. Am I correct in that thinking?
So the difference in that is we've had mandatory overtime for quite some time, and just the sheer number of hours that people work, and then, when you have lieutenants that are making overtime pay, we can fund 2 positions fully for what a lieutenant makes on overtime. So I think that it might shift slightly, but ultimately, when we've worked out, so we got people with probation and other areas that are coming in and helping us by working overtime, but they're making time and a half when they come to work with us because they've got their full-time job as well. So if those things drop down just a little bit, I think exponentially, you'll see a significant drop in our overtime numbers and overall as well. If we're just paying people their that fair, regular pay, and not subjecting them to health concerns by having to work extra hours, which is just not good for people.
How many hours is mandatory? I mean, what does that end up being?
So it's been anywhere from 2 extra days a month to 6 days a month. So it could be, 60 hours a month extra that people are working, just because we don't have enough to cover it.
Right.
Sheriff Williams, we're going to have to move on to the next.
I just wanted to make sure, are the benefits included in the equity pay, figure that we got and that's in the budget of the $700,000?
No.
That does not include benefits?
No.
Okay.
Sheriff Williams, thank you for everything you do. I appreciate you and your staff coming down.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to hear next from State Court Judges Auslander and Hope.
Thanks, Ryan. I couldn't get a better person to hand out than former municipal court judge Ryan Hope, now state court judge, since we've taken him from the mayor and the commission and put him up in the state court. So, Honorable Mr. Mayor, Honorable Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and Honorable Commission, I really appreciate your time today. I know you guys have very difficult decisions you're making. Every request that's made of you, I know, is one that is heartfelt and is one that you've got to really look at. I want to start briefly, without taking up much of your time, with good news from the courthouse. As I came into the courthouse this morning a little before 8, the line of cars was down the street because there were 3 jury trials going on. Judge Lott had a jury trial going on. Judge Norris had a jury trial going on. Judge Hope had a jury trial going on. We had arraignments. I walk in the courthouse before 8. The line to get in there is full. Our courts are fully operational. The building is full. The folks are doing amazing work. And with the sheriff, the district attorney, the solicitor, the judges, we get along really well, and we work really well together with what we have. So I just want to give you good news. I've given you a one-page thing. Normally I come with some great requests, and you've helped us out over the past few years really improve our operations. This year, it's purely about the actual cost of court with what is going on. And so it's not pretty. I'm not a graphic designer. This is an Excel spreadsheet, so please accept it. But I put as little as I could, but the information you needed on this. And I kind of wanted to walk through this briefly so you understood what I was asking. Back in FY23, you can see what our actuals were. That's the very first column. Our actuals for FY23 last year exceeded in the 4 budget pieces I'm asking for, which is an increase for bailiffs, indigent defense, court reporters, and assistance with our treatment and drug testing services for our DUI court. Our FY23 actual expenses exceeded this year's budget. Last year, we were able to make it work because the manager gave us $25,000 in contingency funds. We were very fortunate to get money from ARPA. As I heard you talk about in a different line item, we were able to get money from ARPA, and Matt Justice and his amazing staff with Tim Taylor over at Finance somehow got us to be able to pay all of our bills last year. We got through a very difficult financial year. This year, you can see our budget, which is line 2 for these 4 items. Line 3 is our projections, and our projections are because court is increasing. Between FY21, which was in the middle of COVID, and FY23, criminal filings have increased 37%. That's not huge when you're thinking of COVID to post-COVID, 37%. But our disposition rate has more than doubled. So we have not only had an increase in criminal filings and civil filings, but we've been resolving a whole lot more cases to catch up with the backlog. This year alone, and I heard the sheriff mention because of the fully staffed police department, we're on an increase for another 36% increase in criminal filings, and our civil filings are up 50% for the year. So our filings are continuing to rise even though we're post-COVID for a number of reasons. That is putting us in court a lot more. Judge Hope got here after 6 because he was with the jury until after 6 o'clock. I think Judge Lott was with the jury. That's probably why she walked in after 6 o'clock. The courthouse is busy from 7:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. So bailiffs, indigent defense, court reporters are things that we just have to make sure court is operational. So line 3 is what we're projecting for this year for those 4 categories, and you can already see by column 4 our shortfall, and we're projecting a $72,000 shortfall for these 4 services. Fortunately, with finance, we've been able to work, and with court administration, to get $42,000 of that funded out of ARPA, and I appreciate the fact that ARPA has been able to make the difference this year. I will not have access to ARPA for these things after July. So we've used up all the available ARPA funds in the courthouse setting, at least that have been granted to us by the Judicial Council, and it's not available. And then I'm going to be asking the manager for some contingency funds. And I know Matt Justice and I have already been strategizing on the way to make the rest of the budget work. So we're going to make this year work with this shortfall, which is real. But next year, I'm asking, it's not exciting, it's not something very interesting, it's the courts, but we're here every day doing work, and I need these funds just to make sure we're operating. And these are actual funds. We will expend every dollar that we get. I'm requesting for FY25 bailiffs, I'm requesting a total of $62,000. That's a $30,000 increase. I did put the line items for finance if you were to so approve it. That's $31,000 for Judge Hope, $31,000 for me. Just so you know, and I think this has been helpful, the Superior Court judges get $30,000 per judge. So what we are asking for is just what Superior Court gets for their judges. They actually get line items both out of Oconee and Clarke, but we can survive on the amount that they get out of the Clarke. So we're asking for the same amount. That's what we've spent this year. One thing that you've done, which has been amazing, you support our employees in so many ways. But one of the great things you've done is you've increased the living wage, the minimum wage. Well, our bailiffs are minimum wage employees. So over the past few years, even though we've had less court, their wages have increased significantly because of you, and thank you. But our budget has not had the same corresponding increase to recognize the minimum wage. So while we've got a higher minimum wage, we don't have a higher budget to pay them. And so we do need that $30,000. I'm asking for an increase of only $3,000 in indigent defense. I did ask for more from Mayor Gertz, but since then, as we've recalculated where we're going to land this year, I'm only asking for $3,000 for indigent defense. This is for conflicts from our public defender's office, and they have a lot of conflicts. Superior Court is fortunate. They have funding from a conflict defender's office, so they actually have an actual office that handles these with full-time attorney and staff. We don't. We have to go out into the community and locate attorneys that are willing to come in the court and accept these cases. And we're going to be short about $2,000 this year, and I'm requesting a $3,000 increase for next year. And the last operational thing for the courts specifically is court reporters. Court reporters are becoming very scarce. It is not a profession that people are going into. But for courts of record, you have to have a court reporter to be able to take down what's going into the courthouse, what's going on in the courtroom, and be able to get a transcript so people's rights are protected. Last year, we spent $88,000. The mayor actually gave an increase. I projected we would spend $87,000 this year. Boy, was I wrong. So, Mayor, you gave me you gave me the number I asked. Boy, I did a terrible job of projecting. And we're now projecting $117,000. And that's just because with Judge Hope and myself, we're in court pretty much 4 to 5 days a week. We have court reporters there, and we will be at the $117,000 for this year. I am asking, which is a $30,000 shortfall. So I am asking for a $33,500 increase, which is a little bit more than I asked the mayor for, because at the time I did a poor job even projecting when I went to him. The last piece is DUI court. With court reporters, I did want to note, we're requesting $60,000 each for myself and Judge Hope total. That's a $30,000 increase, but that's what that would get us to. The average Superior Court budget is $86,000 per judge for court reporters. They have, need for more transcriptions and things such as that, but they have a much larger budget per judge than we're asking for. We can manage, I believe, on the 120. I'm just trying to give you some comparisons to other budgets you've already approved. The last thing is the DUI court. Last year, you guys really helped me out. You helped us shift most of DUI court's expenses into the general fund. It has been a great help to our participants because they went from paying a $240 a month for our services, for probation fees, for their drug testing, for their treatment, and we've now reduced that to $100 a month, which goes into the general fund, but it allows us to fund their treatment, drug testing, and other things with general fund money. Now, I do want to let you know that the majority of money that comes in from the general fund, we give back to the general fund because we actually give the money you give us to probation, and it goes into probation's general fund. So I know it's circular, but you have to give it somewhere, and then we give it back. So about half of the money, about $60,000, we pay back to the county for the testing services we use. Because of this, we've already served a lot more people to date. The very bottom right corner for our professional services, we've screened this. For all of last year, we screened 42 people. Through the beginning of May, we've screened 54 this year. Last year, we took 35 new participants in. Through the beginning of May, we've taken in 42, and so we still have 2 months or a month and a half left. Last year, we served 110 participants. To date, we've already served 114. Our participants stay with us for 18 plus months, so that's why you see we're only taking in 40-something, we're serving 100-something, and a certain number are exiting. I want to explain why that participants, actual people served, is much greater than what we take in because they stay with us for 18 to 24 months. And then we've had 34 graduates to date, so we are serving a lot more people because of what you've done. We're going to be short. Initially, I asked the mayor for an increase of $25,000. I've revised that down to $15,000 as a more accurate number. I know this isn't exciting, but you've really helped us out, got the courts moving, we're able to serve, and these are the pieces that we will need to adequately fund our budget for next year. Judge Hope, do you have anything you want to add? Ditto. I like it. Thank you.
Thanks, Judge Auslander. Questions? Commissioner Davenport.
Thank you. Love the work that you guys do. So I must have missed something. This is our second meeting today.
Yes, sir.
So the FY24 shortfall. So you are short $72,633 until July 1st.
Correct.
There we go. So you're looking for ARPA funds for that.
Yeah, I've already tapped into 42,000 to date. So
Okay.
It says shortfall, but I've been able to get 42,000 to date. I'm going to go to the manager for some contingency funds, and then we'll figure out a way to pay the difference. I'm not asking for any money out of this budget, this year's current budget.
So for the FY25 budget, what the mayor recommends, y'all are satisfied with?
No, I'm requesting 81,000 additional dollars
There we
over
go.
the two funds. I'm sorry, it's the very
Farthest.
farthest column on the right, and the total is 81,000, and I broke out the line items for finance. So if you were to approve any of them, they would know what I was specifically requesting.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Link.
I'm just curious if AI technology has been able to assist court reporters some in recent years.
It does, and in fact, the state of Georgia is reviewing court reporter guidelines and how much can actually be done by recording and have AI prepare an initial transcript. Ultimately, a person has to certify it, but my court reporter does use some AI court reporting as far as the transcription piece. So yes, it will help the industry.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, on the court reporter, so is there any type of training programs for those individuals that want to be court reporters locally or around the state? How do they get trained for those things?
Yeah, I believe the training now is either out of state or online, but there is a definite need for court reporters. So if you know of anyone who's interested in going into that industry, we have the Georgia Board of Court Reporting that ultimately certifies people that can work in the state, and I can connect that person or give you that resource so that they can go to it. I don't know how long the training is, but it teaches them all the rules of court reporting.
Commissioner Thornton.
Again, thank you for all you do. I've been to your graduations, and I noticed that, I'm looking at your graduate numbers here, and it was the same question I asked earlier about the outcomes.
Yes, sir.
They
Yes, ma'am.
they graduate, but are we, is there, and this probably will not happen this budget season because it's going to take money for what I'm about to say, is how do we track graduates after 2 years or year? I mean, how do we promote those success stories?
There's a number of different ways, but the state, all of our accountability courts, every quarter report data to the Council of Accountability Court Judges. There's a huge number of data points. Post-graduation, they hire independent researchers to come in and actually run my courts and all of our accountability courts graduates to see how they have done. It's basically on recidivism is the main thing they're looking at, and I get a report as to how my graduates and all accountability courts get a report on how their graduates are doing. So yes, I can get that information.
You don't have to do it now. I guess
That's a great idea.
The next year, we all know the budget is not going to have ARPA money to lean on, and I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt when we have to make decisions. And if there is data or success stories, it would help us to deliberate. You know, everybody deserves money, but there's got to be an edge somewhere. So that's just a thought. It has nothing to do with this right now.
Commissioner, you are dead on. I mean, the reason we fund these courts is for public safety and to reduce recidivism, and that's what we are tracking. And I can tell you that the courts in Georgia score very high. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I will make sure we include those next year. But you would be very proud of Athens-Clarke County.
I enjoyed the graduations. I'm very proud already. Thank you, sir.
Your time. Thank you.
Commissioner Houle.
Commissioner Culpepper and I are over here trying to make sense of all our cross documents here, because we just got them today.
Mine's pretty ugly.
So the mayor's recommended budget includes an increase, and then this document that you've handed us tells us the request. So I'm trying to make sense of the difference between what the mayor's recommended budget is versus the current request, if that makes sense.
One of those is a position that was unfilled that we filled. So I think a portion of the increase in his shows 8 filled positions versus last year the budget had 7 filled positions. So it's not really, I think it's missed. The mayor provided 6,000 additional for interpreting services, but the only real increase on the mayor's budget was for interpreting. The rest is a filled position, if that makes sense. So it's the farthest column on the right of what I gave you at the top is what we are asking for increase.
Asking for increase over the mayor's recommended budget or over your request?
Over the mayor's recommended budget.
Okay.
Over what he has said we would get, which is basically the same as last year in those categories.
Okay, so even though we're seeing an increase in our budget, that doesn't reflect the increase you're saying is totaled up here. It's reflecting those changes in staffing levels. You see what I'm saying? I'm just trying to make sense of what's the final number we're looking at here.
So the 81,000 and change request is on top of what I've presented as a recommendation.
Okay, and then everything in that 331.12 is already absorbed in. We're not doing 81,000 plus some portion of that 331.12.
Correct. I was just demonstrating in those 4 categories what we needed for those total. Maybe that was confusing versus what we got. When you look at the mayor's recommended budget compared to the FY24 budget, that salary and benefits, that was clearly for some positions that were unfilled at the time. The only difference really is that $6,000, which is under operating, is the difference we got. I think that's fair, Mayor. You went with basically last year's numbers, except for added 6,000.
That's right. Commissioner Houle, any question about that?
I think this makes enough sense. I mean, I'm walking away thinking 81,645 is the number this year to have your dreams fulfilled.
To basically be able to pay for everything and not have to come back for contingency.
Yes,
funds.
your very reasonable dreams, yes.
Very reasonable.
I did want to ask real quick, in last year's budget, when all was said and done, we funded that request to move the pot of money that was, like, for people to participate in the Accountability Court program, they had to pay fees, and it came out of the separate fund, and we moved that to general fund.
Yes.
Do you have anything to share about what impact that has had on your courtroom or the people who come through it?
Judge Makin is with me here, but one thing that we have noticed, I did not get particular statistics, is we have not had anyone that's not been able to progress because of money. And in years past, they have to meet, because we were paying into a special revenue fund, we had to make sure that they were always timely on their payments or on a payment plan. And across the entire year, we've only had one person that's even come up on our much reduced funds, and they were able to get caught up on a much better payment plan within, I think, 2 weeks to be able to move forward in our program. While that was normally a week-to-week, I don't have actual data for you. But the increase in our enrollment, I would say, also lets people know that finances aren't a barrier potentially to come in. And we have a long waiting list to come in between now and the end of the fiscal year.
All right, Judge Auslander, Judge Hope, thank you so very much. Appreciate the work you do down there. Great professionals in our courthouse. All right, we're going to hear next from our magistrate court, and we have Chief Judge Ben Makin along with his associate judges with us today.
So, good evening to you all. I think I know everyone, but I'm Ben Makin. I'm the Chief Magistrate Court Judge. Here with me today are Judge Donarell Green and Judge Kelly Wagle, our Associate Magistrates. My presentation tonight is hopefully fairly straightforward. We are here essentially to thank the mayor for his recommendations and to ask this body to adopt his budgetary recommendations as it relates to magistrate court. The reason that I come here, given that we are in agreement with the mayor's recommendation, is that I feel like this is an opportunity, albeit brief, but for the commission to hear what is happening in our court, to ask questions that they might have about our court. So that's what I'll devote the majority of my time to. I always think it's helpful to look back and think about the investments that this body has made in the past and how that impacts our court. Last year, our primary request was that a part-time position for what we call our garnishment clerk position be converted to a full-time position. The reason that we asked for that is that we were having a difficult time attracting a quality candidate for the garnishment clerk position at the part-time rate. You know, believe it or not, there aren't a lot of retirees that are looking for a fun part-time job that want to handle garnishments. So we were struggling there. And we also knew that a lot of the duties that related to garnishments and other civil items that require great in-depth focused attention were essentially being things that were kind of crammed onto other people's plates, which is not ideal when you're distributing large amounts of money. And so subsequent to the funding of that position at the full-time rate, we were able to attract a very high-quality candidate who's been in the office now for a number of months and is doing an excellent job, and again, is able to dedicate the focus and attention to those tasks that they deserve instead of being one of many items that is on someone else's plate. So we certainly view that investment last year by the commission as a success and are very much appreciative. Thinking about the budget as it relates to our work, the way that I think about our work is kind of in three separate lenses. The first being the quantity of our work, the second being the logistics of our work, and the third being the complexity of our work. In terms of quantity, I looked at our civil case numbers for this calendar year. They are up slightly from 2023. I would say, just looking historically and thinking back over the 12 years that I've been in magistrate court, our numbers this year, if they continue at the same pace in terms of civil filings, would be within the normal boundaries. They might be slightly above average over those 12 years, but not anything that would exceed filing numbers that we've had since I've been a judge in a magistrate court. Our criminal warrants are also up. I'd say that just in full disclosure. Warrants are not a very good method of tracking activity because there may be one case that has 7 warrants. And so when you're looking for sort of criminal case volume, the statistics that you would get from the state court judges and from the Superior Court judges and from Judge Gonzalez would be the more helpful measure. So our quantity of work is still what I would consider within the bounds of what Magistrate Court has historically dealt with over the last 10 to 12 years. In terms of the logistics of our work, and hopefully this will be the last year that I will mention this, but the singular challenge to the logistics of our work is that we are still operating on a case management system that is over 30 years old. That replacement system was funded by the 2010 SPLOST tax. And through a series of delays, we are still working on implementation here in 2024. That makes the work for our staff more challenging, more labor intensive, more difficult, and it limits the public ability to access and utilize our court. In 2024, folks are very comfortable and expect to be able to access public documents online. If you're an attorney, you expect to be able to file documents online, and those are just things that are not available right now. Our system is literally the old green screen that you would see, just the black and green text that you saw on computers maybe when you walked into a government lobby 20 years ago. So we are, I am told, as I have been told, still just at the precipice of that new system. The hope and goal is that we will go live on that new system this summer. And there's no ask there. There is no need for any intervention by this body. I would suggest, just as food for thought, that just in terms of, when those funds are allocated, ensuring that they ultimately go to the project they were intended for as quickly as possible, it may be worth someone, and this could be from our office or from another office, just kind of looking back over the last decade and figuring out sort of what went awry here, sort of in the way that the police might do an accident reconstruction and try to figure out what the heck went on. And to be clear, I don't want to suggest at all that anyone in this room or likely even anyone from Clarke County is the source of that delay. But certainly when I see some of the tasks that our clerks have to carry out and when I see some of the inconveniences to the public, it is frustrating. Today, we got mailed-in checks for 25 cents because of people out of town needed a copy of a document instead of just simply going online, paying the 25 cents, and making a copy. So that is our logistical challenge. But again, hopefully, this is the last year that will be something that I'll describe in our work. And then in terms of the complexity of our work, there probably is a sense, and there's definitely some truth, that a lot of the laws that we use to adjudicate cases have been around kind of since the beginning of time, and that is sometimes true. In the last 5 years, though, I started to think about just the number of changes to the law that were really significant that impacted the processes and the workload and the complexity for magistrate court. There was a complete revamping of the process for garnishment cases. The process for appeals and how those are handled was completely revamped. There was a revamping of the process for abandoned motor vehicles. There was a new category of cases created called abandoned mobile homes. You all may have heard recently about what is titled the Squatters Reform Act. That creates a different process, and that law specifically transferred jurisdiction over those cases from Superior Court to our court. You all may have also heard about changes to the law regarding bond, and that's one of our primary functions, is making bond determinations. So none of that necessarily directly impacts our budgetary needs, but what we do and how we do it is a moving target. And the laws that are passed, both at a state level and a local level, certainly are things that we have to adjust to, and we'll continue to do that. I do want to say lastly that two things. First of all, we have an outstanding group of folks in magistrate court, both clerks and judges. I think you all know how difficult it is just in terms of hiring to retain skilled, motivated people. And our group in magistrate court is just excellent, and it's a pleasure to work with each and every one of those people. And I would also say, on a broader note, I was kind of trying to count up how many different departments in this county I interact with, and I think I got to 8 different departments, and that's not even counting state court, superior court, municipal court, juvenile court, probate court that are really our courthouse partners. So those folks, plus probably another 8 departments in this county. And what I can tell you is that when I have issues that we have to deal with, and when I have to reach out to these other departments all across the board, we all have our challenges, we all have, sometimes our disagreements, but consistently what I am met with are folks that are looking to solve whatever the problem is, folks that are looking for a solution that serves the community, and folks that are engaged in their duties in their department. So it's really, since I've been chief since the beginning of 2022, been really heartening to get to interact with more folks in the government and see the commitment and the talent that really resides across the county. So with that, again, we appreciate the mayor's budget recommendation, ask you all to adopt it, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thanks, Judge Makin. Got a question from Commissioner Thornton.
I always have a question. Thank you for what you do. And so even though you're asking us to adopt the mayor's budget recommendation, we should be paying attention to your case management automated services in the future.
I would say I don't anticipate, from a budgetary perspective, I don't anticipate that that system will generate further financial obligations for our office.
Okay.
So in that sense, I would say no.
Okay.
I think hopefully the way that you'll pay attention to it is that folks will have better access to our court, greater transparency from our court, greater efficiency, and all those types of things. Looking backward, again, and this is just strictly food for thought, it may be valuable to kind of think through the process here, because I don't think that if someone had said to the commission in 2010, hey, the magistrate court will be waiting on their case management system in 2024, I don't think anyone on that commission would have been happy.
Okay. And my last question is, I know that your court oversees the eviction prevention program. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so the initial partner, and you'll forgive me if I don't recall their names exactly, but the initial partner worked very closely with the logistics in magistrate court. And by that, what I mean is that they typically had someone in court on the days that we had those calendars, and they typically, we would then know whether they were going to provide funding or anticipated providing funding for a particular case resolution, and then we would get reports back on whether those cases had been paid, in addition, of course, to the cases themselves being dismissed. The new partner, is it Family Promise? I believe it's Family Promise. So I met with them when they first began their work, and I just explained the system that was in place. I did, it is ultimately, they are the provider, they are tasked with doing the work. And I laid out that, this was sort of the connection that we had in the past. They felt like that attending court posed as many problems as solutions, if I can paraphrase what was relayed to me. And candidly, I think that's entirely possible that that's true. It takes a lot of manpower, and you also may get into difficult situations when you're sort of deciding whether to approve someone for funding on the fly. So with this current provider, I do not have the same level of connection, but I want to be clear, that's not a criticism. And that, in fact, may be the best process. It is simply, was their judgment of how to best allocate their decision-making process for approval and the manpower that they have. They, obviously, I feel confident, they have accountability to the commission in terms of their work. From our end, it would be a little difficult to see exactly their impact because we only know how many cases we got. We don't know how many cases we didn't get. Or sometimes if a case is successfully resolved by their contribution, we may only know that it was successfully resolved. So that connection is less than it was, but I would not say that as a criticism. I would simply just say that as an alternative. And our dispossessory filings essentially is maybe a slight increase over last year, but roughly on par with last year, to the extent that that gives you any information.
That's perfect. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Judge Makin, for being here, helping us understand everything clearly.
Yes, glad to be here.
Really hopeful that you all have fewer envelopes soon. So I had ideally two questions, which are hopefully not too long to answer. The first was just if you had anything to add. I know Judge Auslander mentioned you in his remarks, but did you have anything to add with regard to the impacts you've seen and the changes to the accountability court participation or success now that it's funded through the general fund?
Well, I'll go way back in time to my time as a public defender, working in state court, where folks had the opportunity to choose whether they wish to enter the DUI court or not. And of course, folks at the public defender's office, traditionally indigent, financial limitations, and oftentimes those discussions centered around whether or not they could be successful, not just in terms of recovery, but in terms of finances. And I think I could say with a high level of confidence that that is not a factor that is weighing into those decisions right now. There may be other factors. Every person makes their own choice as to whether that's the best route for them in their case in their life. But I don't think that because of that lessened financial impact, I think we are in a situation where that does not deter people from coming into the program. Anecdotally, I can also tell you that our participants range from folks that are very, very low income, perhaps disability, those types of payments only, all the way up to folks that are more wealthy. So we see a broad and healthy spectrum of people in terms of their income level coming into the program. And the idea of the program is that you want to have the barriers to entry be as low as possible, because one thing that we've figured out is that you never know who's ready to make that change, and you don't want sort of a logistical barrier to prevent that opportunity.
Thank you. And that dovetails nicely with my next question. You noted the state legislature's changes in mandating cash bail, and I've understood that your court, with slight variance, has generally set bails quite low for most of those cases that used to be owner cognizance bonds. But I've also heard, without having specific facts to add it all up, that a lot of those low bails then lead to someone in jail having to pay fees to get out on top of that. And so I'm curious if you have any insight to share on where this bail situation leaves us in terms of what y'all are mandated to set and what people ultimately have to pay just to get out of jail before they go to trial on these misdemeanors.
Yeah, so just very briefly, ultimately the change in law, which will be effective July 1st, will be to add, I think, a couple dozen new criminal charges to the list of offenses for which we cannot release somebody without some amount of money bond. And then there's another precursor change, which is that if you have been arrested for a felony within 7 years, you are now prohibited from getting a UJR or no money bond, regardless of what the charge is. So that is the change that will come July 1st. I have not done any, well, number one, that change, of course, hasn't even sort of impacted our court as of yet. The changes that have taken place over the last few years, I don't know that I could speak in any intelligent way to data. I think there is sort of a common sense aspect and probably some anecdotal data that's available in terms of the effect of that limitation. Obviously, we are, obligated to follow the law. We will always follow the law in magistrate court and in all of our courts in Clarke County. But that was the decision that was made, and we have to abide by it. Certainly, I think post July 1, it would be an interesting topic to gather data on.
Okay, so sorry, without data, maybe just, do you know offhand, is there an amount that you can set for bail that will then not require that person to also pay fees to get out of jail? Or is it anyone in jail, no matter how low the bond, is also going to have to pay, what is it, a $25 or a $35 fee?
So my understanding is that there are 2 statutory fees that come with a bond. I believe, and I'm going to caveat this a little bit. I am not certain. Let me just say, when I make a decision, I have to make the best decision that I can. And sometimes even the ramifications of whether a person will be released or not might not be obvious. And so my understanding is that one of those fees is a percentage fee, which, of course, the lower the bond, the lower the percentage is going to be. The other is a fee that is affiliated with the sheriff's office. And I think in terms of when and how that fee is assessed, I would probably have to defer to their office for a definitive answer. I believe, I think I can say this, that traditionally what I have been told is that the sheriff's fee is $20 per case on the bond if it is assessed. Not per charge, but per case.
Okay, thank you. Maybe that's something we can look into as a body with regard to the fees that are being assessed at the jail and whether they should be applied to bonds that are set below the fee amount.
Yeah, I remember we had sort of an adjacent question when we put in place the marijuana possession ordinance. Commissioner Fisher, and then we've got to move on.
I'll do this quickly. Did I hear you say on your case management that was implemented in 2010 is not operational or?
Funded by SPLOST 2010.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we have not implemented it, or, I mean?
It is not, the term that they use is go live, for the system to go live, and it is not live as of today.
Can we find out why? I mean, that's a long time.
It is a long time,
Wow.
yeah. And again, it's probably a longer discussion, and some of it predates, anyone who was involved with that decision.
Right.
And I just bring that up because, that's money that this body, well, the taxpayers allocated in that case, and there's real benefit to that money. And to me, my thought is always what's done is done, but how can we learn from this? And so that if, say, there's another implementation of another project through SPLOST funds, particularly something that I think is a little further down the priority list in terms of when that would be executed, that we do better, at least if it's in our department. So I'm happy to cooperate and gather information with that as much as I can.
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about that, and maybe this body can have some discussion about that, Mayor, about why this hadn't happened.
And we certainly will get some information through the manager's office. 2 quick notes I would make, one of which is that, of course, every SPLOST package is programmed over a series of tiers. And so this naturally was a later tier project.
Yes.
And then the other thing that I remember having been part of the construction of that package ahead of 2010 is that we were looking for some comprehensive courthouse management software, which I think has eluded many courthouses, including ours, just in terms of being able to have really all of the courts and all of the systems in one system to rule them all, so to speak. And I know that we weren't able to get there, so that was just a technological challenge. But we'll get some more information through the manager's office.
Yeah, and again, just to be clear, again, no concern on anyone's part in the county. If I were to bore you with the history of corporate mergers that affected this project, you would not enjoy it.
Judge, thank you. Associate judges, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
And we're going to hear next from Solicitor General Will Fleenor. Solicitor Fleenor, good to see you, sir.
Good evening. All right, I can, before I really get started, I can follow up to Commissioner Hoole's question about that bond issue. I have a feeling it may come up at some point during my questions and answer session here. I believe that the amount, and Judge Auslander's, I believe, still here, that we have found is $10 or something around $10. If the bond is set at $10 or less, then the sheriff tends to not charge any of the fees. It's been some time since I spoke to the sheriff about this, and he's not here, so I don't want to speak for him, but I believe that we reached out to him over a year ago about that issue and inquired into whether or not it was a requirement on his part to charge a fee if the bond was set at such a low amount. And he indicated that they would not be charging a fee if it was clear that the court had to set some monetary bond, but it was so low that it should not have a fee attached to it. I will say that one of the things Judge Makin mentioned was the increase in the number of charges that are going to require a monetary bond. That increase is substantial, and just in terms of the number of people it's going to affect, who at this point are probably not posting any type of monetary bond. And since the sheriff is not here, I'm not going to dive into that, but obviously that is going to affect the jail, that's going to affect the sheriff, it's going to affect staffing, because you're going to have a larger jail population. And really, there's no way for us to prevent that. And I expect us to see that pretty quickly after July 1st. Anyway, I'm going to backtrack, just go back to the beginning here, start off by saying thank you, all of you, for having me here this evening. I don't plan to take the full 20 minutes. I'm going to try and be as brief as I possibly can be. I want to first off thank this body for approving the budget that it approved last year that included 2 new positions for my office. I'm happy to report that both of those positions have been filled. This body granted us 2 additional positions, one for an additional victim advocate. We now have 3 victim advocates and a victim notification clerk, and an additional investigator position. We now have 4 investigators, and that's the first new investigator that the Solicitor's Office has received, to my knowledge, in 20 years. The advocate positions, we did add an additional advocate, I think, maybe 10 years ago, but that was a relatively long period of time. And in terms of the number of cases that my office handles, the number of victims, I believe if you look at our missions and goals from last year, you'll see that we assisted thousands of victims. I think it was 3,700 victims in 2023, 3,800 the year before. For 2 people and a victim notification clerk to do that, it was nearly impossible. Even for the current number that we have, it's very difficult, but it's much more manageable. And I really believe that the office is functioning as well right now as it ever has. And I've only been the solicitor, obviously, since the beginning of last year, but I've been with the solicitor's office since 2010, and we have good people in good positions who know what they do and care about their job, and the office is running very well right now. I also want to thank this body for approving the attorney pay study, for first approving the study to be done in the first place, but also in implementing the results of that study. That study and the results of that study allowed me to hire more qualified candidates, and we now have all of our attorney positions filled. And having those positions filled, it really is hard to calculate how beneficial that has been to my office. One way in which it's been beneficial is freed us up to do additional things outside the office, make improvements like our second chance desk. That's been a pet project of mine for years now. It's a record restriction desk. We've been working with the Georgia Justice Project for years to bring that to Athens, and with the assistance of the District Attorney's Office and the attorneys from the Georgia Justice Project, we were the second county in the state to have one of those desks. And they come every month. They send 2 attorneys and a staff member. They meet with members of our community, and they offer them free record restriction advice. They help them fill out the forms and the motions that most people can't fill out on their own. They're too complicated for them to do, to know what to do, how to do it. And all that's free. It's perfectly free. They can apply online. It's very easy to do. And those are the kind of things when you have that extra time, when you're not running from one place to the other, having to cover extra caseloads, that you can have the time to devote to those type of projects. And I appreciate this body's part in all of that, because I think without the decisions this body made, that type of project would not have been possible. This year, I'm not asking for any additional positions. I've requested 2 things. The first is in the mayor's budget. It's additional funding for an update to our digital file system. I believe District Attorney also has that in her budget as well. I will start off by saying, frankly, this wasn't my idea, but I do fully support it. This was the brainchild of Travis Cooper. He's the director of our IT department. What Travis uncovered is that we're spending quite a lot of money on servers just to store all of the data. And he found this alternative solution through Axon that would allow us to store unlimited amounts of data basically on their dime. They would provide all of the actual hardware, unlike what we're currently doing where we're providing the hardware. And what attracted me to it, what for me was the really interesting part of it, is it integrates our digital system with the police digital system. And we live in a time where every officer, including Sergeant Leader who's sitting over there on his phone, every one of these officers has a camera, and that camera is potentially running all day. And when we get a case, even a minor traffic infraction, there's a video that's attached to it. If the case is slightly more serious, there might be 2 or 3 or 10 or 20 videos attached to it. And our investigators since 2015, when these videos first started emerging, were spending hours of their day just watching that little wheel as the video downloaded to one computer only to be uploaded back into another place. And Mayor Gertz and I had a long conversation about this last year, and one of his suggestions was that we locate some sort of software that the two could be integrated. I didn't locate it, but Travis Cooper did, and what he suggested was that we basically just integrate with the police system. We use the same system they use, and this version of it creates a sort of prosecutor suite. It's the same sort of digital system we currently pay for, but it's integrated into the police system, which means it should seamlessly transfer all of the data that we currently store from the police system into our system without a person having to sit there and manually do that, which will free up investigators for both of our offices from hours and hours that they spend just staring at a computer screen, and will get them out into the field doing the things that we want them doing in the field. This is already in the mayor's budget, the proposal that we've put forward. I believe DA Gonzalez put a similar proposal forward. Obviously, hers is slightly more expensive. They have more staff members than we do, and it's based on the number of licenses that you need. Depending on the number of staff members, there are 20 people in my office, including myself, but that's already been approved. But I did want you to understand why we are asking for that money, what that's about. One other thing I should also note is, well, two things really. First, we're kind of already paying for it. The police department has given us, the solicitor's office and the district attorney's office, some of their Axon licenses, right? While they were short-staffed, they had all these extra licenses that they were already paying for. Well, those are going away because they're filling those positions, and we're having to return those licenses to them, which means my office has fewer and fewer of those to actually utilize. But this county has already been paying for those through the police department's budget for years now. It's just that my office has been using them, which is not going to be an option much longer. And the second thing I'll say is we're still using another system called Laserfiche, in which we use to store evidence and to share it with defense attorneys and with defendants. We hope to be in a position in a year from now, and if Travis were here, he could answer more questions about that, exactly how long that will take, to stop paying for that system. And that roughly costs my office about $10,000 a year. That's already in the budget as well. So while we're asking for a substantial increase of over $27,000, we hope to recoup some of that in the coming years so that it actually, that number will come down because we'll be returning that portion of the budget once we no longer need Laserfiche. So those are two things about the expense involved there. The other thing that I've asked for is a capital expenditure, and it's for an additional vehicle. Last year when I came to you, I was brand new. I knew very little about the budget process. I asked for the additional investigator position before I was actually the Solicitor General. I'm not sure if that was even legal, but I sent in a request in anticipation of being the Solicitor. And you granted that, but I failed to ask for a vehicle to go with that investigator, right? And all of the investigators, to my knowledge, and we have Attorney Drake here who could clarify that, but I believe even the county attorney's office has an investigator that has a vehicle. All of the investigators in the county, they're all post-certified. They all have vehicles because they spend a lot of time in the field. And so I neglected, and that was my fault, to ask for a vehicle along with that position. Now, we've been making do. We've got 4 investigators. We hired the 4th at the beginning of this year, but it's difficult for them to effectively do their job. And The hope is with this new Axon system, they'll spend less time sitting in front of a computer in the office and more time out in the field collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, and even notifying victims. We have very important requirements to notify victims of every court proceeding, and oftentimes we're trying to address that case where someone's sitting in jail very quickly, right? Because we want to make sure that they don't just languish in our jail. But the other side of that is we have these requirements to notify victims, and we may try the phone number and it doesn't work. So what do? We send an investigator out into the field to try and locate the person and to notify them in person that there's this court proceeding going on, because we don't want someone sitting in jail on a misdemeanor charge because they can't waive bond, but we have our own obligations to notify victims of any court proceedings. And so we've started utilizing our investigators for that. And again, having that investigator without a vehicle, there's still quite a lot he can do, but it does hamper his ability to really effectively do his job, particularly if someone calls in sick. That means we're short another vehicle, and there are only 3 vehicles to begin with. And so that's why I've requested the additional vehicle. It's not, I believe, my understanding is that it's a separate expenditure. It's in the capital projects budget, so I requested that separately. The numbers on that were entirely based off the information I received from Fleet, that a vehicle of that type would cost roughly $40,000, that it's supposed to all be expended in a single year. The additional portions that would go with an additional vehicle, such as insurance, fuel, and maintenance, those were actually included in the mayor's budget request. Those were also part of my request for over budget expenditures, and those were actually included. I believe it's roughly $5,700. So that's already there in the mayor's budget. The only thing that's missing in my request is that vehicle. I'm happy to take any additional questions about any of that or any other issue that anyone may want me to address.
Questions from the body? Commissioner Houle.
I didn't arrive here with anybody, but thanks to that, I now have 2. So one, this might be more for staff. I'm looking at our capital summary by fund, which I really appreciate y'all letting me know I need to look at, which is D5. And I'm not seeing the solicitor listed here, so I'm just trying to make sense of where that vehicle request is. I see on the budget highlights for the solicitor, C122, that there's $5,700 recommended in the mayor's budget for additional vehicle funding, but that is not the same figure that Mr. Fleenor just gave us, so. D4. Oh, there's like 2 lists, okay. I'm learning all the time. Okay, so the mayor's recommended budget that says $5,700 for additional vehicle funding, that's separate from the $40,000 capital request. Okay. And then the other question I have, this contract with Axon, I guess it's maybe like a 2-part question. Under the terms of this contract, who owns the data? And then you noted that your office and the DA's office and ACCPD would all be able to access it. I'm curious if the public defenders would also be able to access it.
Right, so I haven't actually seen the contract. We haven't signed a contract with Axon at this point. I don't believe, I can't answer exactly what the provision on who owns the data would be. They would be contracted to store the data for us in the same way that Laserfish, or actually it's MCCI, is currently contracted to store the data for us. It's not uncommon for us to have to contract with a third party to store our data. As far as who would have access to it, I don't believe the police department would have access to our case files. So what's in our case file, there are a very limited number of people who can see what's in there because it contains a criminal history that's also in that file. So the only people who can see it are people who work in my office, and then for a particular file, the attorney who's associated from the defense side with that file. So the public defender's office already has access to all of the Laserfish files for individuals that they represent, and that would be exactly the same on Axon. They'd have access, they would be able to see the file. It's slightly different from their side. They don't have the ability to make any changes to the file, to delete anything, but they can download anything from the file. They can keep the files there and just use that as their own file storage if they choose to do that, but the files are all available to them as soon as they notify us that they're representing an individual. And that's our same process that we have right now.
perhaps I'm the only one who cares about this, and if so, then maybe don't worry about it. But if you feel inclined to share with us once you do see that contract, whether, like, any clarity on who definitively owns the data per the terms of the contract once you see it, and then also, if I'm hearing from you that it's extremely likely that public defenders will have the same access that they currently do, but just to make sure that that's true.
Yeah, and we won't, and it's not just the public defenders, but all defense attorneys, pro se defendants, we give them access to, my office has an open file policy, so they have access to everything that's in that file as soon as it goes into the file, and that won't change. And we wouldn't, we wouldn't switch to another system if that wasn't an option. It was one of the things they displayed for us, and it appears to work basically if anybody's used Google Documents or has any kind of online file storage system, it appears to work just like that with folders and subfolders. And so one of the things that we do have the advantage of is that Travis has funding for the first year, which we intend to sign a contract in this fiscal year. And so we have a full year to use it before my office would spend any funds on it. And if there's an issue with it, we can always say this, we need to make some changes. But we have this year to transition, hopefully from Axon to, from Laserfish to Axon. And I'm happy to follow up with you later about the specifics of the contract. What I will say is I'd be shocked if this company, which is a national company, hasn't already set out very clear terms that indicate the company has no right to any of this data, because most of this stuff is protected by statute, particularly the criminal histories, and I can't imagine, it would be a violation of state law if they were to say, have some ability to retain data in these files.
Other questions for Solicitor Fleenor? Commissioner Thornton.
The only thing that I would like to follow up with Commissioner Hull is about who will be able to use the data. And I think specifically he asked about the Public Defender's Office. That would be the only thing I would like to make sure of.
Absolutely. And, as I said, our current system that we use, Laserfish, it's called CASE to the public defenders and defense attorneys. As soon as they indicate to us that they are representing an individual, all we have to do is a simple click of a button to give that individual attorney access to the file, right? And they get an email that says you now have access to this file. And until the case is closed, they retain access to the file. The same thing would happen in this new system. They would be immediately notified that they have access to the file, and they would have all of the evidence that we have in a particular case, they would immediately have access to. It also includes court documents like the warrants and other paperwork, like the bonding paperwork, but it's mostly utilized for digital evidence, like the Axon videos. In the past, before we had Laserfish, we still had some videos. People had to come to the office, and they had to take their laptop and copy it, or we made a disk for them, or there was some other way of transferring the data. They stood at the copy machine and copied everything. That's what we did for years and years. When we went digital in 2017 and signed this contract with MCCI for Laserfish, that was the first time defense attorneys could suddenly just click a button and access the entire file as a digital file. And really, it's been 7 years now. We have no intention of going back to that. Going back from that, everybody has enjoyed that system.
Others? Mr. Fleenor, thank you and your office for your work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all
Thanks for coming
very
out
much.
tonight. All right, we are going to hear next from District Attorney Deborah Gonzalez. Good evening.
Good evening. Sometimes there's an advantage of going after others, right? Because you can fill in some of the gaps. And I did want to fill in one of the gaps in terms of that software. It is very needed. We had a couple of weeks ago an outage of this particular electronic discovery system for about 3 days, and it almost paralyzed both my office and the Solicitor General's office in order to do the work in the court. So this is sort of a sense of urgency for that. The other thing, Commissioner Houle, your concern over the public defenders, Laserfish has not been a perfect system. So for example, if something got updated, nobody ever got alerted. Our office didn't get alerted, and it's one of the biggest complaints that public defenders had, is that things would get up there and they would not be alerted. Those two issues would actually be addressed by the new system since it is seamless. So I just wanted to add those two things, there are advantages to getting into this system for both the prosecutor's offices and for the public defender in that way. And, you know, we have felony cases, they're much more serious. Sometimes we still have to give flash drives in terms of the data that we give because they're just too big. And that is, again, one of the fallacies with Laserfish is that some of these files just cannot get across. Or if there are particular cases that deal with like child molestation or porn or those kinds of things, that has some restrictions by law on it and cannot be digitally shared with public defenders or defense attorneys. So those are things that are still going to be out there and needed for that. But I just wanted to address those things. And, you know, we are very thrilled that we're going to be getting a new system because it is very much needed in order for us to do the best work that we have. So I wanted to follow up with that. But good evening. It's nice to see all of you. Thank you again for the opportunity. You know, it was great listening to Judge Auslander, and he says, you know, I want to bring you some good news. So I'm going to follow that, and I want to bring you some good news. As you know, we have had a very challenging year in the DA's office, and I am very proud to say that this past Saturday, we had a full-day training for 6 new ADAs that have joined our office within the last 2 weeks. And that now brings us back to the point where we were when I first walked in 2021 with 5 vacancies, and it was the same thing back then. So we have really weathered the storm in the past year, and we have brought that in. I want to explain to you a little bit about how we got to that point and how we were able to hire these individuals after the challenges that we've had. And this has been something that is a prosecutorial shortage across the country, not just in our office, not just in our state, but across the country. And, you know, when we had that market study, of which we're appreciative, we still felt that that did not address completely all of the issues in terms of compensation for the very specialized types of prosecutors that we need. So, for example, we are still faced with being uncompetitive for high-end, very sophisticated, complex type of prosecution of things like gangs and SVU or special victims, those kinds of things there. And you have heard me come to the commission and send you guys proposal about how necessary it is for us to get these kinds of highly skilled individuals. These attorneys are professionals, and as you've heard, Judge Makin talk about the complexity is increasing in the cases that we are getting in our office. And so these necessary skills of these individuals who can do these kinds of complex cases, that costs money. And just bringing them in at the regular salaries that we're offering because of just the number of years that they have been practicing is not going to give us efficiency when we should be looking at the type of work that these individuals have been doing and the kind of complexity of the cases that we're actually getting now from before. And that will become even more complicated once we start seeing more and more artificial intelligence making its way and its mark in terms of the work that we're doing and the evidence aspect of the work that we are doing. You know, those 6 ADAs are coming because we have done a transition in the DA office. We have revamped the way that we put out assignments. We have also had these individuals are now coming in as hybrid remote ADAs, meaning that they will spend some time in the office, but the majority of time in a remote location, being able to do all of the backup work that those attorneys who are in the court in front of the judge needs to have prepared in order to do that, including going to trial. We are looking at the models of the UK, where they have barristers and solicitors, some attorneys who go in court and some attorneys who do the prep work and all of the logistics and the paperwork. So this is an experiment for us. So far, it's going well. We have looked at other DA offices, including Fulton and Gwinnett, and the way that they have been using individuals in a hybrid manner in order to get the functionality done. And that includes that one of these new ADAs is just focused on appeals. She is appellate attorney. She can do motions for new trial. She can do officer-involved incidents. She can do resentencing. There's a bunch of things that she can do that we just did not have the capacity for the past year to get done. So we are really excited about that. But even with those shortfalls, we have not fallen short of the work that we've needed to do. We have kept up to date in terms of the number of victims that we have served from one year to the next, and in terms of the number of cases that we have addressed from one year to the next. Now, you're going to see that one of the things that I did ask in my budget request that was not approved and that I am going to argue for today is it's been noted already this evening that ARPA funds are going away. And we did have a certain number of ARPA positions or ARPA funded positions. And one of the things that we did with those ARPA funded positions is something that this office has never had. And that is that we've never had paralegals. We never had legal assistants. We never really had administrative staff to do some of the paperwork and the filings and some of the sort of technical stuff that needs to happen in a DA office, which meant that victim advocates needed to do some of that clerical work instead of dealing with the victims and assisting them, that investigators were doing some of that clerical work, which they really did not need to do when they needed to be out there finding victims, finding witnesses, serving subpoenas, taking care of the evidence, making sure that we had what we needed, or even ADAs, attorneys doing some of this clerical work instead of them being in their offices and preparing and prepping for court and for the trials. So what we did was we took these ARPA positions and we created some sort of pseudo legal assistants, apprentices, paralegals to take up some of that. And that is one of the reasons why we were able to keep up with the work that we were doing, even though we were short-staffed, was because we were using these individuals to do that preparation as legal assistants and legal apprentices, which is why I'm asking that you do fund them. My request is less than $150,000, and as you listen to other requests that were put forth this evening, it was things like $300,000, $600,000. I'm asking for $150,000 that would help us keep these positions for individuals employed, but also help us to be as efficient as we can and get the work done that needs to be due. You know, I'll give you an example. Things have really stepped up a lot in terms of Athens and what's happening in the criminal system. We've had some really high-profile cases from Lake and Riley, and I was able to bring in resources from the Prosecuting Attorneys Council to get the #1 murder prosecutor to help us with that case. But also, if you look at what happened in terms of the code case of Tara Baker, right? And that's a perfect example of when you put resources to an issue that you have, you get results. And that's what they did in the code case unit. The state put resources. They said, we want to take care of this. We have about 40 code cases in my office. Tara Baker was one of the top 3 that we were waiting for information so that we can go forward on. But that was a coalition that was able to get that done. But again, if you put resources into these things, you are going to get results. And I've always said that a budget is a moral document. Tell me where you put your money and I'll tell you where your values are and what it is that you really want to get through. It's a way of connecting your objectives to putting your resources there. And that just brings me to this issue of public safety. You've heard the sheriff speak. You've heard the Solicitor General speak. You've heard the judges speak. We are all interconnected, right? The more police officers that are out there and the more arrests that get made, the more cases that come into my office and the Solicitor General's office. Our obligation and our duty is due diligence to every single case that comes into our office. Well, the more cases that come in, the more resources that we need in order to be able to do that. Because if not, we're just not going to be able to keep up and we're going to have a bigger backlog. You know, we're getting to the point, I came in, we were having a backlog because of COVID, the courts were closed from jury trials and grand juries for almost 18 months. There was a 2,400 case backlog the day that I walked through the door. That keeps getting smaller, but as the increase in the arrests and the cases happen because of the increase in law enforcement, that backlog continues now to increase because we just don't have enough resources to meet them. It is an equation, right? When you have law enforcement enforcing those laws and arresting people, then you also need the other side of that equation where they can then prosecute and do the due diligence that increase requires. I always look at this as a coalition of all the law enforcement agencies, and we do work closely together. We can't do our work if we're not working together in that way. The other thing that I was really sort of interested as I was sitting here and listening to Judge Makin, I love the way that he sort of put the quantity, the logistics, the complexity of our work. My office is not just with Athens, right? I have Athens, I also have Oconee, but in Athens, we only take care of felonies and juvenile. Whereas in Oconee, because they don't have a Solicitor General, we also take care of felonies, misdemeanors, and juveniles. But felonies can be quite complex. Felonies can be quite intensive in terms of preparing for those particular trials, or even in terms of preparing for plea negotiations with others. And it is a very different skill set than just dealing with misdemeanors and working at something that might have a max of 12 months incarceration or a max of a fine of $1,000. Our cases, it can be life for an individual. It can be up to $50,000 and more. These are much more complex cases that need that type of specialized skills. And again, we cannot get them if we cannot pay for them. So that is what I am asking in my budget. I know that you've already approved the digital evidence management system. We appreciate that because we desperately need it in that way, but also that less than $150,000 so that we can have those 4 positions to keep going in the way that we are. At this point, I only have 2 vacancies in county ADAs. We have 2 offers out. We're waiting for them to get back to us. So I do not need the $43,000 that I was asking for contract attorneys. I do not need that anymore because we are getting these individuals in and taking care of that. So that is what I am asking for. I thank you as always to be supportive of our office and the entire public safety team here in Athens, and open to any questions.
Thank you, and to your staff. Questions from the body? Commissioner Davenport.
So your ask is just 143.7 for the 4 positions.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Thornton.
I just wanted to be clear. Those 4 positions, are they paralegal or administrative? I just want to make sure, or victim advocates.
So there is 1 legal assistant. The way that they were put in for ARPA was 1 legal assistant, 1 investigator, and 2 assistant DAs. Because we could not fill the assistant DA positions, what we were able to do is instead get legal assistants, right? And so they were able to do the clerical work. And again, this was a position that we never had in the DA's office. They are very common in other DA offices to have paralegals, to have legal assistants to help this work.
Thank you.
That's how I use them.
Thank you.
Other questions for the DA? DA Gonzalez, I really appreciate you coming down tonight. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
All right, and taking up the rear tonight is newly appointed Chief Judge Lott. Congratulations on your appointment, Judge Lott.
Thank you, Mayor Gertz. Good evening, everyone. I think I do know all of you, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa Lott, and I am a Superior Court judge. I'm here representing the Superior Court. We consist of course, Judge Norris, Judge Haggard, and Judge Stevens. And I just want to certainly say how much I appreciate all of you, and I certainly appreciate Mayor Gertz, your recommendations and your budget on our behalf. I'm not here to ask you all for anything. I just want to tell you how grateful we are for the support that you have given us. I certainly want to remind all of you that we do not run a surplus. Superior Court does not do that. When we have used the resources that you have allocated to us and we are done, we give it back to the general fund. And so I just want to make sure you all are aware of that. We are not in need of anything other than what Mayor Gertz has recommended for us, and again, we're very appreciative of that. We did get 2 positions that you gave to us last year, the AV coordinator and a treatment accountability court coordinator, and that has been wonderful. And so I just certainly want to reiterate how grateful we are for that. That was just a great segue into 2023, 2024. My door is always open. I just became chief judge. It's kind of my turn to take my turn, and I'm gladly taking that mantle, but my door is always open. If anybody has any questions, you want to talk to me about anything, please come find me. If you have any questions about what we do at the courts, I do like to tell people out in the public, come visit us, come to court, come watch us. Sometimes it's really exciting. Sometimes it's not. But it's a day to come watch. It's really the best way to answer questions if you are curious about what we do on a daily basis. We're incredibly grateful, but we are all, I have to say, on behalf of all of us, incredibly grateful to serve this community, and we appreciate your support. So I'm here to answer any questions if you have anything, but that's it. I don't have anything to ask anybody for today, so I just want to tell you how happy I am to be here, and thank you for what you do.
Thanks, Judge Lott. Questions from the body?
Can I just,
Yes, sir.
I'll be remiss without saying hello to Laura Welch, and congratulations on your new position.
I should have led with that, actually. And you know what, I meant to. It's been a long day. So we are so glad to have Laura with us again. She is the perfect person to help be our liaison with you all. And she's a personal friend of mine also. So I'm very glad to have her on that front. She works with all of us so well. So I appreciate your mentioning that, Commissioner Davenport. I should have started with Ms. Welch, but we are very glad to have her with us.
Other questions?
Thank you for your time. Oh, yes, sir. All right.
Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, so I hear you saying you don't have any asks today, which
That's
is, always the easiest thing to hear. But in the budget request that we received, there's 2 positions that are not funded in the mayor's budget. So am I hearing from you that those aren't things that you see the need for anymore, or at this current time, or given the current climate?
Right,
Yeah.
I would say at this current time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right.
Judge Lott,
All right,
thanks for
thank you.
staying past the
course.
dinner hour. We appreciate the work you do every day.
Thank you very much. Good to see you all.
Thanks. Have a great night. All right, y'all, at this point, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then Manager Williams is going to outline responses to questions you have and provide a little bit of additional information that staff has been able to gather. And then we'll go ahead and continue to gather any input from the body as we continue to gestate the budget document. So go ahead and take a break. All right, everyone, we are going to go ahead and resume our conversation. And we're going to do ahead just a couple of things, I think, in the time we have, given the hour that we are at now. It's about 8:39. So Manager Williams emailed quite a bit of information to folks today. And of course, the expectation is not that you would have read this in your very leisurely afternoons, but he's going to hit the high points around the new material that you have in front of you, some of which answers questions that you had at prior meetings, and some of which is just some new material that staff has aggregated based on some contemporary knowledge. And then we'll just go down the line one time and kind of place on the table either any budgetary questions you have that are pertinent to the dollars that we will be spending in the next year, or make any significant observations that you want to line up ahead of the next budget meeting on Thursday. So Manager Williams, I'll turn it over to you just so you can let commissioners know what they have in front of them and hit the high points. And of course, any questions you have of the manager we'll be able to do after his presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. You've got a lot of paper in front of you. So there's 4 documents that were handed out by myself and Assistant Manager Jones. And I guess really in order of priority, the first one I would call your attention to is the commission budget questions from the, just the other night, Thursday night. And I appreciate Tim Taylor, our budget director, and Sarah George, our assistant manager, helping to compile these with staff. And we can go through those at a high level. I told the mayor earlier, we actually like it when you tell us what you want answered. And I would say that, you know, it's a lot of information and it's hard to, y'all have a lot of hard decisions to make. I mean, there's some compelling arguments for things that weren't in the budget. And, you know, budgeting is a exercise in priorities, as we always say. That being the case, what would be helpful tonight, we can talk about all the stuff you've asked about, but we need to quickly identify any other issues that aren't in what we're handing out so that we can give you the responses so that you have all the information as y'all try and find that final budget solve. So I'll come back to that document. The second document I'm going to call to your attention is the additional FY25 budget items to consider. As you know, a long time ago back in March, we had the Big Rocks conversation. Lots happened since then. And then, of course, the mayor turned over his budget at the end of April. There are some things that have happened, and I'll talk about that we need for you to address at this late date in your final budget solve. And I can walk you through that briefly in a minute, answer any questions you have. As a companion to a question that is in the first document about the manager's office reorganization, there is a response in that first document, and then staff has prepared a justification to combine the budget and strategy functions, and I'll explain all of that. And finally, the fourth document I shared with you is the org chart, which you've gotten before, but I just wanted to put it back in front of you. That gives you some additional context about the manager's office reorganization. So that being the case, if I might, let's start off with additional budget items to consider, because I believe that you need to be acutely aware of these things as you try and balance your priorities. So even since the mayor has turned over his budget, we were able to successfully negotiate ACC Gov's first ever collective bargaining agreement with the firefighters. And the cost of that first agreement is somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000. On June the 5th, you'll be asked to approve that collective bargaining agreement, and if you do so, then we will need these funds to make good on that promise. By and large, about $100,000 of that is for 2 special considerations unique to the fire department. They would like to ask for an updated class and compensation study, and we've set aside $75,000 for that. So in the next year, we will hire a consultant who will come back with recommendations for any salary adjustments, which would then go into the next iteration of the collective bargaining negotiations. Also, the firefighters have asked that they not be made to cut the grass or keep the grounds at the various fire stations, and Central Services has costed out for lawn and grounds maintenance through a private vendor about $26,000. Finally, the biggest cost has to do with transitioning all public safety that are currently reporting on a 28-day cycle for overtime, according to the Fair Labor Standards Act. It is allowed to go to 28 days. But what the effect of that is if you are a public safety officer and you incur overtime, let's say in the first week, and in the third week you have to take vacation, or you want to take vacation, or you have to take a sick day, then what they do is they substitute the sick day or the vacation for that overtime. So you lose that time and a half that you had earned earlier, because you have leave that could be supplanted for it. And so I've heard this for some time from various public safety departments and personnel that they would greatly appreciate reducing that to 14 days, which gives them the opportunity to capture that overtime before they may have to take a vacation or have sick leave. We operated a legacy system before last year for, let's call it an ERP system that's finance and personnel or HR functions. And it was very complicated, wasn't really suited for that. And of course, as you know, the finance department helped to shepherd in a new ERP system that you approved the funding for a couple of years ago, and then most recently last year, HR converted to Munis on the payroll as well. And after some examination, the holdup is there was some cost considerations, but more importantly, logistically, it was very difficult. And HR does feel like they can administer that now. So we want to be consistent as we can and not give one department special consideration that others don't. So I would advocate that you go ahead and do this for all public safety personnel. And if you do want to do any QC on that, just ask any person that works for public safety if they would prefer that. And I trust that they would tell you they would. So that's overall the amount to the collective bargaining agreement. And again, I want to thank our HR staff that helped to negotiate that. I want to recognize the team from the union and specifically the outside counsel that Attorney Drake hired or introduced to us, who was instrumental in a very successful first process. I think that there were some questions when DA Gonzalez was here about those positions. I know Oconee County was recently going about that. I believe Commissioner Wright had asked for some follow-up information from the DA, so I won't go over that in detail, but we can cover that as much as you want to. And I'm sorry about this version. I had added some information to it, but had some computer issues. So in the third bullet, you'll see where descriptions needed. I had typed that in a different version, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to print it out. But what that is I think it was House Bill 451. And so that was recently passed. And what that mandates is that as an organization, we need to obtain PTSD, post-traumatic distress syndrome, insurance for all of our folks. If somebody does experience it, I think there's a $3,000 lump sum payout and they go on disability for some time. But overall, I think the cost of that is somewhere around $60,000. So that is an unfunded mandate, but you can argue that that's something that probably will be welcomed. And or $75,000, I'm sorry. And then Central Services is asking for consideration for the facilities rehab crew that was recommended by the mayor, and this is that paint crew. They do need a truck, and that was an oversight. And if we follow the directive to try and have moving towards that clean and renewable energy commitment, that would be an electric truck, and there's a cost of $81,000. These are all general fund items. There are some ARPA and special revenue fund items I'll cover in just a minute. I did get some questions from Commissioner Davenport and Commissioner Myers about level of service for rural mowing. And this happens just about every year about this time, especially if there's been a nice wet spring. And this is simply a level of service. Now, we have had some staffing vacancies that have made it difficult to adhere to the cycle. But if you would like to increase the frequency of mowing in the rights of way, then, you know, what Central Services would say is just add another crew. And there would be some operating expenses of about $250,000 a year. But if you were to get a crew like that, to outfit them with the correct equipment, it'd be about $350,000. So all in, about $600,000. And so right now, we have one tractor crew that does mowing services for 720 miles of rural roadways, and that averages about 11 to 13 weeks. An additional team will cut the cycle to an average of 6 weeks. So that is somewhat similar to the 5-week cycle that is found within what I thought used to be the Urban Service District, and I heard Commissioner Fisher mention that tonight. Turns out, though, that the difference in the mowing crews, the rural mowing crew versus the urban mowing crew, doesn't have to do with the old city limits. It's more relevant to the road cross-section. So if you've got just simple grassed ditches, that's a rural road cross-section. But if you have curb and gutter, stormwater inlets and that type of thing, that's an urban. So for instance, and I learned this by following up for the commissioners, that the urban mowing crew actually works out on Whit Davis because they have curb and gutter. That's clearly outside of the old urban service district. So that's the demarcation between the two. But if you would like to cut the mowing cycle for the rural road cross-sections, which are grass ditches, from 11 to 12 weeks to more like 6 weeks, then you would need to put $600,000 in this year's budget, and then there would be an ongoing obligation of about $250,000 a year. Similar to that, Commissioner Hamby brought to our attention some concerns with some of these small vestige areas that we are responsible for. And on page 2 here, you'll see, like the Holman Peninsula, as it's called, or the Parkway Crescent, the Eyebrow, Commissioner Wright, that folks refer to, that I know you get calls from your constituents about, Riverbend Parkway, the center medians. So these are found across the county, and they are subject to the same 5-week rotation. And of course, we've had some, I said, staffing challenges. So, the mowing doesn't go year round. It stops in the late fall, early winter when the grass starts dying down. But when spring starts and mowing starts, there's obviously a 5-week lag for some places. And if you got a good, spring weather, 5 weeks will get you more than a few inches of height. And that might not be to the level, and again, I want to emphasize this is a level of service. Staff is willing to do whatever you want us to do. But if you put the resources behind it, we can do that. So to try and be helpful, as opposed to adding a crew for these small specialty areas, and I would say that, they are more visible and they are, situated in key areas and neighborhoods. Unlike the rights of way in the more central areas where most of the time, and I know I do, I mow the right of way in front of my house. So a lot of that stays cut, but then you have these areas that are clearly not a private property owners, but they're looking across the street at it. So with all that being said, you can increase the level of service for these, and I can give you a lump sum figure for that. But you can see it's several $1,000s per location. So not a huge budget impact, and certainly if that's important to you and your constituents, that's something you may consider in the budget solve. So here is the information on the PTSD. I did include it later. And we're going to put $75,000, but really what we're talking about is a half-year budget impact of $57,000. And you can see that's based on a premium of $155 per person. So the annual cost is around $115,000. We put $75,000 as a plug number early. This is, like I said, a document that I had meant to clean up. And I appreciate Interim Director, Human Resources Director Lori Pollock and Assistant Director Sarah Ivy coming up and computing this for us. So the very minimum we need for this half-year budget will be $60,000. So those are the general fund considerations, and there may be more than that. I do know, Mayor, we talked about the ADDA parking split, and we need to, maybe at the next meeting, get you some information in advance of that and make sure that those figures are correct. And again, we'd love to hear from you, anything that you have, and we will compile all this information and aggregate it in these documents so we have one place that we can go and chase it all down, because it's a million details. And I'll just mention ARPA and stormwater, and then we can answer any questions you have on this particular document. But with regards to ARPA, you know, we talked about having a process where when you return from the break, we probably ought to have a meeting, a special meeting dedicated to how we're going to deal with ARPA situations. Now that doesn't, the remaining ARPA funds. Now that doesn't prevent you, as you did tonight, from going ahead and allocating some of those funds if you're comfortable that you have all the information and are willing to do that. I will say that Ms. Hattie, the chair of the Athens Justice and Memory Project, y'all put a down payment on the future Racial Futures and Black History Museum. I know that she's had some very productive talks with Classic Center Director Paul Kramer, and they both have agreed that it will be housed at the Classic Center. And then I have to give Paul Kramer and his staff, tremendous accolades for producing the Lennon-Town play. And it sold out, and if you didn't know, it raised about $35,000, and if you didn't know, Paul is going to give that money. That's going to be the rent that AJMP will pay for the Racial Futures Center. So they went through the trouble and the effort of helping to stage that event, and then all those proceeds are going to help to fund that. So I think a great partnership there, but they are interested. Ms. Hattie would like the remaining money, which would be $750,000 to complete it. So just to help everybody remember, AJMP was doing their due diligence, and through UGA, there was a study done on the compensation that they felt were owed to the first descendants, and that came to be about $5 million, and that was based on the values of the property that was, the consideration that was given back then, adjusted for inflation. And of course, in Georgia, we have the gratuities clause, so we just can't give that money to people. And so this body did allocate funds towards certain affordable housing initiatives, down payment assistance in some of the more challenged census tracts. And in addition to that, the commission last year allocated $500,000 towards this center. So when the $5 million figure came out, AJMP said, well, $2.5 million to the university, $2.5 million to the ACC Gov. Y'all put $1.25 million down towards affordable housing, which left $1.25 million for the center. You've already paid $500 or allocated $500,000 for it. And so if you want to make good on that promise, you'll need to allocate the remaining $750,000. And we can help you find that within the remaining ARPA funds. What I would suggest, and I've talked to Attorney Drake about it, is that just to make it clean, and since they have such a good partnership apparently between AJMP and the Classic Center, that this will be an intergovernmental agreement, and we'll just transfer all the money to the Classic Center, and they will help coordinate the build out and the design at the behest of AJMP as an advisor, and hopefully we'll have a successful center. So that's really all the detail on that. And then with regard to Lennon-Town, the Inclusion Office, in concert with Leisure Services Arts Division, is going to be putting out an RFP for some art in the allowable area, in the Lennon-Town area, to commemorate it. And then separate from that, and they've been thinking about it for some time, they would like some interpretive signage at the same place. And they are asking for an additional $50,000 to make sure that they have enough money for both the art, from some money that you've given them before, as well as the signage. And it doesn't have to come from ARPA, but I put it in there since you were already making an allocation to them, but that could be general fund if you wanted it to be. And then finally, with the stormwater fund, and y'all, so this doesn't hurt as much as anything in the general fund because the stormwater fund is funded by fees and there's so much revenue, and staff does feel like there's enough revenue to purchase these 2 trucks that they need that are part of the level of service increase that you recently voted on. So if you'll remember, the utility was established in 2006 with a certain level of service that was advised by a Citizens Advisory Committee and approved by the Mayor and Commission. And it had been, 15, 16, 17 years since that had been visited. A few years ago, Mayor Gertz appointed that group, and they did some good work. And they brought you several choices within the last 6 months about level of service, and you selected one. And so these trucks will be necessary to help implement that level of service adequately. So thank you for listening to me, and that is that document, and I'll take any questions that you have about that. And I'll look to the mayor to.
Thanks, Manager Williams. And, I think we can kind of combine this and we'll just sort of go down the line, begin with Commissioner Link. So if you've got questions about the documents in front of you or other considerations that you would like your colleagues to have in mind as we move into Thursday and subsequent discussions, you use this time for all of that, kind of as you're looking at the dollar figures that you're conscious of. So I'll begin with Commissioner Link, and we'll just move down the line.
Yeah, I'm interested in these little peninsulas and medians and triangles. Has there been any assessment of what it would take to replant those with low-maintenance landscaping, perennial shrubbery, stuff like that, where you wouldn't need to mow them? Maybe once a year you whack them back before the wintertime.
That's an excellent idea, Commissioner Link, and I'll remind everyone that I was driving back in town down Danielsville Road and saw some of those plantings in the median. That was part of that corridor program that y'all had approved a couple of years ago. So absolutely, if that's something that you would like to see and put resources towards, we can come back to you with some cost about that, to cut down on the mowing. Of course, the plantings themselves, there will be some maintenance, but that is a great idea.
I think that's it.
Yep. Thank you. It's a lot to take in. So I'm really interested in the, where's that document? No, use it here. So the rural, consider my district, the rural, additional rural mowing crew, sorry. Like I said, it'll improve the appearance and safety of on our rural roads. It's a beautification as well. So I'm definitely interested in that. And I have a question about the fire union collective bargaining. So they're asking between 600 and 700 total, which includes FSLA 500 to 600 and 26,000 for contract costs, and 75 for class and compensation study. Okay.
Yes, and just I believe that of the majority is the FLSA cycle, and I think roughly half of it's the fire department and half of it's the rest of the public safety departments.
Thank you for this information. I'll probably have some more questions in the email once I've absorbed it. The information that is related to previous budgets yet to become, that's coming forward. I know that was, as we say, dissertation level
Yes.
stuff, but we'll get that. I guess just the documents, as you say, are building upon each other, so we just have the one. So it'll build on the one that has your description in it versus the fill-in, and then you'll add in from the previous. But I've got a lot of new information to absorb tonight, but from our speakers as well as yourself. But I appreciate everybody's hard work to this point.
If I could, Mayor, sorry, Commissioner Fisher, So thank you for that. And if you do email us a question, we'll collect it and put it in the document as well, so everybody has it. And I know it is a lot of information. Thank you.
Thank you again for putting all this together, and I did email you a question today about some things. I do want us to really consider with my colleagues, and Commissioner Manager Williams had left when we talked about this, when the sheriff made his presentation, that we truly look at bringing those salaries up to the ACCPD salary, starting salaries, and also looking at the signing bonuses, that all of them be the same. So I hope we would consider that. On the mowing, and again, I'm not sure that we ever looked at that, but have we ever looked at outsourcing, that what that cost would be if we outsource it compared to if we did it in-house? Because I know we're trying to do a lot of catching up. I understand we've been having some issues with trying to hire people, but is there an option on the table for us to look at outsourcing some of that, just to maybe just get us caught up, get it done, and then if we decide to fund the additional mowing crew, we can look at it then, but.
We can attempt to get some order of magnitude costs so y'all can compare that.
Okay.
And I think we all know that about midsummer you're going to start learning what Johnson grass is, because it gets pretty tall.
And I think my next question, I thought I write it down, I didn't. Never mind, I forgot, so.
I did the same thing. And I was going to, Commissioner Wright, so we have compiled the Excel document that shows what we received, which was simply the line items with a couple words about what the CDO was meant to do. So we have that. I've sent it out and got some responses back. We're trying to get a complete document for you. Could be that we just need to just give you what we got and then keep adding to it as we go in the interest of time. But we'll get something to you.
You got it? Yeah. So, we talked about the rest of our ARPA funds, and I know, once we take our summer break, but is the timeline gonna be so tight? Should we, we had presentations today, should we be talking about now how we wanna go in and fund those, or should we wait till we get back?
Well, I appreciate that, Commissioner Fisher, because you're right. If you want to go through an RFP process, that, will take some time, and then you've got to do contracting and everything, because you've got to have the contracts executed before December 31st. So time will be of the essence as you return. So I do encourage you, let's go ahead and start talking about it now if you can. But I do respect the fact of what was said earlier, that there's still a group out there completing some work too. So, you want to have all the information when you do your final allocation. But, I think going ahead and sharing ideas and putting together some strategies would be helpful, I think.
The one note I might make about that is that obviously if we're going to open an office internally or collaborate with the school district on opening an office, we don't have to worry as much about that RFP process. So if we're going to move forward with the chamber, we would need to kind of have collective consciousness of that in the very near term. And I think kind of right after the break, we would be able to initiate that program.
No worries. We're all here to do their questions. I'll send these in an email, but just to run through quickly, I'd like to follow up on that discussion we had with some folks from the courts about the fee that's charged at the jail, and just to get clarity on whether we have anything to do with setting that fee, and if and how it's applied with any kind of discretion, and what revenue fund it ultimately kicks into. The fee meaning the fee that people pay when they get out on a bond. I'd also like to follow up with staff on clarifying, I'm sorry, all the pollen's really got me coughing here. The affordable housing investment strategy, what programmatic offerings does staff recommend for that strategy? Like if there's a prioritization from staff, and to clarify kind of the relationship between those, say like gap funding for LIHTC projects and a strike fund, so we can understand what figures we're working with. And related to that, this is less urgent for the budget maybe, but if it's easy enough to include, it might be good to have it in the same place, is maybe just some kind of supplemental information on the average cost per unit of housing that's built with LIHTC funding in other communities, so we can get a sense of how we want to apply that funding. And following up on Commissioner Fisher, I share interest in that. So the total in the sheriff's office request, so the total figure for bringing parity for bonuses and the total figure for bringing parity for salaries, it'd just be helpful to understand what that is. I imagine that my napkin math with the different figures I'm trying to put together isn't quite accurate compared to what you all would produce. And of course, I understand that comes with a separate question about HR and the step plan. Would really appreciate getting an updated ARPA spreadsheet, even though this one's only a couple weeks old. We just used some funds tonight, and just something that includes any changes so that we know what we're actually talking about there. The last three things I have written here maybe aren't specifically money, but I'll just throw them out there. I'd be curious to understand, this is probably an attorney's office question, how the IGA with the Classic Center ensures that folks from the Justice and Memory team are at the table and that it doesn't just kind of live in the Classic Center's coffers without having to meaningfully involve those folks on the implementation of the Center for Racial Justice and Black Futures. I'd like to understand if we fund this alternative response team in partnership with Advantage, how Advantage would go about applying for those funds next year. Does that need to be part of their quasi-governmental request, or is that something that gets included separately in the process? And then finally, I see on here we have that answer to the question around the ARPA interest and whether, and I see that the attorney's office answered definitively that no, we don't have to report that, you know, we can use it as general fund essentially. I'm curious the answer to the reverse. If we wanted to opt to use it that way, could we? So if we wanted to opt to use the interest from ARPA money to pay for something the same way we do for ARPA, can that funding be used with that kind of flexibility? That's all I got. I'll put it in writing.
Commissioner Houle, if I could rephrase that last question, especially with Attorney Drake here. So my understanding is that, you know, we were given this bolus of funds, based on a formula, and we're a city and a county. We got $57 million. And of course, our finance staff does an excellent job of responsibly investing in good cash management practices that has yielded, of course, with better interest rates, you know, several $1 million by the end of the day, just, you know, without any other place to go, they put it in an unallocated fund balance. And we understand that you may have an interest to do something different with that. But that interest was earned there. So the question is, and perhaps for our outside counsel, you know, I hear you saying, could we use those? Because my understanding of the entire $57 million, at the time that the ARPA funds were given, governments were given a choice. They could allocate it for certain things, or they could book it as revenue replacement if they could prove that they had actually lost that much revenue during the COVID time period. And finance staff had told us, well, we can account for all $57 million. You could make it all revenue replacement and I think the standard is anything that the local governments normally spend money on, okay? And so that would be protected. Because ARPA is federal money, then much like CDBG, it's not subject to the Georgia Constitution or gratuities clause, so it has more flexibility with regards to being able to give it directly to people. And y'all have used that to help folks here in the community. So I think the question is, I call it the federal tinge, maybe for our outside counsel is, would interest earned on the corpus of money be considered to still retain the federal tinge? If that is your question.
So it seems like we've gotten a clear answer that it isn't necessarily. In other words, like we can just let it live in our budget as general fund and not have to worry about the reporting.
It can do that, but can you do the reverse of it?
Yeah, can we, if we wanted to, use it that way?
To give it directly to direct recipients and avoid the gratuities clause.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hey, following up on the mowing discussion, I'd still like to see a map of some kind that shows us where those rural versus urban roads are. Along with that, Commissioner Fisher mentioned the contracting that out. I guess I want to understand how the mowing crew, I mean, I know the mowing at my house goes from a certain season, so what happens to our mowing crews, hiring a whole other mowing crew when it's not mowing season, how that works? In terms of the small little islands that are mentioned in here, do we have an inventory of all of those that exist in Clarke County? I think we have to think about equity in terms of our approach to these islands. There are some significant ones in my district as well that
Yes.
I asked the neighbors who's taking care of them, and it's quite a big field, and it's people chipping in, doing a little this or that in different areas. So I don't want us to be spending $3,200 on a location where we have neighbors in other parts of the community that are just doing this on their own. So I want to be fair on that. In terms of other issues, the situation with the sheriff's pay and that concerns me with the number of empty positions there. It looks to me like with our police department all ramped up and then changes in state laws, if anything, the jail is going to get fuller, and we already have situations where inmates and officers are having bodily harm because of this situation. I was also a little concerned about the food situation there at the jail as well. I do want to make sure that we get that $750,000 to Lynn Town from the ARPA funds that we started on last year, the second payment on that. I am interested in seeing what is the best way to further fund our affordable housing fund. And lastly, the one additional, position that's been added that I'm very concerned about us keeping is that sustainability office grant position. So those are my points for tonight.
If I might, Mayor, since several of y'all brought up the sheriff's pay, so we are a professionally run government, and we make recommendations on pay based on a points classification system, which is a standard with local governments. And we have gone through several different pay studies with different vendors. That involves an analysis of internal equity, which is the relative positions across the government, and that was made much more simple by the implementation of the 2018 pay study, where we created a public safety plan because they are different, what they have to encounter versus non-public safety. So we do have two, and so the internal equity are amongst the public safety plan. Okay, so does a lieutenant in the sheriff's office who has the same job responsibilities and has been graded on a point factor system compare to a similar rank in the police department? The other piece to it is external equity. And I know that there have been some insinuations of unfairness and all of that. Y'all, this is just what other jurisdictions pay their people. Period. Now, that doesn't prevent you, and I've asked the attorney, you can deviate from that, and you can, do it a local supplement or addition to any position that you want to. But we can't recommend it because we don't have any basis to do so. Doesn't mean that we're obstinate. It's just we're going to base it on the data, and a proven methodology on how local governments normally do that. But certainly you can take that wherever you'd like to.
Yeah, I'll just respond in that the number of empty positions there, when the pay is higher with the police department, with UGA, I'm thinking about the safety of everyone involved in the jail at this point. It seems to be a critical situation that could get worse.
And pay is one factor, but not the only factor on morale issues.
I just want to clarify, we're talking about the sheriff supplement?
Yeah. Well, no, we're talking about the personnel.
Right. Well,
I didn't mean to speak for you, Attorney
For
Drake.
personnel, I would recommend, going back and do another pay compensation study, before you raise up personnel. I thought you were just talking about the supplement for the sheriff.
I'm sorry. In all fairness, that was
There's discretion with the supplement for the sheriff. For the employees, I think you ought to do an updated pay and classification study for those positions.
And so, thank you, Attorney Drake, and I want to say I'm sorry about that. That was a quick question I asked him and didn't clarify. So I would totally advocate for that, and much like the attorney pay, you know, and like the firefighters are asking for, if you want to ask, you know, I think we did to do a sheriff's pay study 2 years ago, and this is what we came out with. But if you want to try and do that again and use that as a basis to raise those, I mean, maybe the reporting jurisdictions that we would look to for external equity have raised theirs that might make a difference.
Thanks, Manager Williams. Commissioner Taylor?
Well, I would just ask that we, consider adding more to get our land bank up and running. I feel like we're falling behind on having land that we can build on, especially in my district. It's been bought up, and so that's the only thing that I have.
Commissioner Thornton, I'll let you wrap it up.
I would like to know how much, I think I found out recently, the Danielsville Highway 106 is ours. It's not GDOT's. I would like to know how much it will cost to run stormwater down 106 in that area. I want to know what the dollar amount is. I also remember that before I came on this commission, we put sewer at some homes, sewers, but the residents have to pay to connect it, which was somewhere in around $5,000. So people have sewers set up, but they're not connected. I'd like to know how much it costs to lay that sewer system down, and how much, around about how much it would have cost to connect. My last thing is, no, that wasn't my last thing. And because 106 Danielsville Highway is our responsibility, I would really like to know why there has not been any attention, whether it's through SPLOST, general funds, or whatever, for the lighting. There's no lighting when you drive down that two-way lane. So I'm concerned about lighting, I'm concerned about the stormwater system, and I'm concerned about the sewage system. Before we go and everybody's talking about the strike fund and the land fund, I'm very interested in just building houses or building units. Commissioner Hamby received from you a list of parcels that are available. I really think that should have been part of the housing study. I've also gave to my colleagues the NACA handbook, which I'm going to give yours when I leave here, Manager Williams. And I would like, the committee is going to probably invite NACA here to talk to us. It probably will not get in this cycle, whatever we can do. But these funds and these, the other thing I want to know, there are other utilities that have funding. Can we get a list of all the utilities that have funding in their coffers? And the last thing I want to know is, you were going to you sent me the infrastructure information. You were also going to show me exactly where those bike lanes and PEDs were, a list of where we spent that money on. So, is that enough to close on?
Mayor, if I could, though, I'd like to just clarify, Commissioner Thornton. So I believe I understand exactly what you're saying, just to make sure, though, so we get you to you in a timely way. So what you would like for us to cost out is a curb and gutter system along Danielsville Highway 106 that has stormwater inlets, collects the stormwater, and conveys it to creeks, nearby creeks. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then with regards to sewer, of course, that would really depend on, the topo of your lot or how far away you are, but we can pick a straw, maybe an average type lot and give you a cost estimate, whether it's 5,000, 10,000, whatever. But you are correct. There are, and I think you would be surprised at how close in certain neighborhoods are that do not have sewer. As a matter of fact, I think we have a little over 44,000 parcels, and about half of those have septic tanks. So there's a lot of that out there, and we've talked about, sewer being run to certain parts of the county, and there's certain parts of the county the commission historically has not wanted to go to. I do know that as part of the push for more affordable housing, there's some projects, particularly in your district, Commissioner Thornton, that may want to request a sewer extension, which would then take it by some houses. And unfortunately, we can't pay for those connections because that is private property. And sometimes that's a hurdle for somebody. But I will say this, there are some lots that some duplexes were built on a long time ago that since then, the regulations governing how much area that you needed on your lot to have a septic tank, the size of the lots regulation has gotten bigger. And, you can take care of a septic tank, but ultimately it has a finite life. And so for some of those duplexes and houses, what that means is if they don't have the land or they don't acquire some property near them to expand their site, it won't be a livable place. So running sewer, is something that to be considered, and it does have a companion cost, but it's voluntary. You don't have to. But
didn't we install sewer lines?
So generally we'll run the sewer lines on the right of way or in the road, and then the homeowner has to come out and tee into it.
Okay, and that's my point. If the homeowners didn't want to pay the money,
They don't have to.
they don't have to, but we paid somebody to install some lines that we're not using.
The other ratepayers paid for it, and that's why usually we won't do sewer extensions, and there's a policy I haven't read in a long time where, if you're going to run it to a neighborhood that doesn't have sewer, you're going to want a certain number of folks that will say, yes, we will connect to it to make it worthwhile.
Okay.
And we can follow up on that, but I hear you want a cost estimate for, just average house, hookup, ballpark. Of course, it would vary depending on conditions.
Well, the last thing I'm going to say is I do appreciate all the work that went into this, the information that you gave us. And the other night I asked about posting some of this information on our website so people who are watching can actually see what you handed out today, if that would be okay.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm sorry, folks are taking notes, but the third issue, so it's stormwater, sewer, there was a third issue I wanted to speak. The lighting. The lighting and bike path. Bike paths. So bike paths, no problem. I'll work with our chief data officer to see what we have mapped. With regards to lighting, so this is something that comes up pretty much on an annual basis. So we spend about $1 million a year. You spend about $1 million a year general fund through TPW to pay. We have 3 different service providers, 2 EMCs, Georgia Powers, most of the county, and then we have our own lighting that we own, particularly in the downtown area. I think Bethel is going to install lighting that we will then, the ACC Gov will manage directly. So it's not a cheap exercise, and oftentimes we have neighborhoods that want some security lights, or we've heard the UGA students, Commissioner Wright, come and say, hey, we'd like some pedestrian lighting. The current policy regarding the lighting has to do with roads and the vehicle safety. And so, for instance, if you're about to hit a cul-de-sac, then we would light that up so the driver would know, the road's about to run. Or horizontal or vertical curves, going up, and you need to see, or you're going around a corner, we would put lights there. Or if you're approaching an intersection, we would have that lit up too. So there's a policy that addresses that. And I would say this is another level of service. So if you want to visit that policy and make it more liberal, or if you want to open it up for pedestrian lighting, we're glad to do that. It's just a cost issue, both in terms of a little bit of capital and then certainly operating going forward.
And that's why I'm asking now, because we're in budget season.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's a cost issue.
Oh, yeah.
And my other thought is, I don't know what policies can alleviate 2 fatal fatalities on a road. That's the first thing. And I've had 2 on 106. And I also need, now, see, you kept talking, you should have let me go. Now I got another question.
Okay. That's why we're here.
We talked about the intersection on 129 that DOT felt that they could do something with because we had a fatality there also.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any updates on that?
No, y'all, I didn't receive any objections to it, so we're going to tell them that we were in support of it, and I think the mayor's written a letter of support, and I don't know the timeline, but as soon as they give it to us, but we thought that was a win.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
That's right at the intersection of Harv-Mathis Road and Highway 29.
Yes, sir.
And in fact, just if you think about the geography of Clarke County, really the last significant new sewer line that was installed, not a replacement sewer line where we expanded capacity, but new sewer line altogether, it was Highway 29, really sort of up that corridor. And of course, that had a big impact in terms of the ability to develop multifamily housing and commercial properties in that corridor. So we've seen a lot of that impact there. I think Commissioner Fisher had a quick addendum. Okay, he's got it covered. All right, so Manager Williams, anything else for the good of the group?
Yes, if you would, just 5 minutes, and then I'm done. But you had asked about the reorganization, so I'm going to let you all read it just to provide you some specific information. But I just want to clarify verbally because it's a lot of information to take in. And so on page 2 of the document that is your commission budget questions from the last one, about midway down, you'll say, please provide more information on the divisions transitioning to department. So, and I wanted to make this distinction. So there's several elements to this, and they're not mutually exclusive. So if you like some or none, but you can pick and choose. It's menu style. You don't have to do all of them. But there's 4 separate proposals. Of course, one is the addition of a 3rd assistant manager in the office. A second one is a requested name change. Okay, so there's 2, whether they're departments or offices, it doesn't matter. Let me say this. Inclusion is asking, and only the commission can approve department name changes. And so they would like to change the inclusion office to people and belonging is what they would like that to be. And then a third initiative that we're asking for your consideration is the transfer of the budget division from the finance department to what is now the Geospatial Information Office. In so doing, though, in so doing, you will be giving considerable responsibility to that office, which I would, and HR I think concurs, that would really give it a department status. So what we want to do is move budget out of finance and align it with strategy. And the GIO, the Chief Data Officer, has been very instrumental in working with everyone on strategic plans, and that way you've got the budget staff and strategic planning staff working hand in hand and even doing some of the same work. And so the other document that I handed out to you is a justification. I'll let you read that at your leisure. And then the 4th initiative is converting officers of various offices, just turning those into departments. And I've got in here the justification for that. So I just want to take a minute and say there's different parts and pieces to it. You don't have to do all of it. You can pick some and not others. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Manager Williams. All right, so we will convene again on Thursday, of course. I wanted to make a quick note that corresponded with the attorney earlier, and we'll need an executive session on the 22nd, that Wednesday at 4:30. So I'll send out a reminder about that, but wanted to mention that to everybody while we're gathered here. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn tonight. I've got a motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Davenport. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time tonight.